my script? Ready to begin? Well, good afternoon. Thank you for everybody who's here, and for those, I'm sure many are tuned in online or remotely, streaming lively. We appreciate everyone being here, and I will start with the agenda. My name is Barry Graham, a council member. It's my first, we rotate on council, and this is my first meeting here, so bear with me as I'm kind of getting acclimated into this role. It's good to see you. Purpose of the Development Review Board is to maintain the quality of development in Scottsdale by reviewing all the design aspects of proposed development and the relationship of those design components to the surrounding environment and community. Board also reviews all preliminary plats for subdivisions to assure conformance to policies and ordinance requirements. The agenda will consist of the following. We will call the roll. We will ask if there's public comments on non-agendized items. We will ask for an administrative report. We will approve minutes from prior meetings or the prior meeting, and then the action items will begin. A roll call will be taken after each item's motion. The liaison will call each board member's name and indicate their desired vote for that item. After the vote has been counted, the liaison may read out the final vote. Eric, do you want me to say all the other stuff about public comment? Is that, okay, required? Okay, I got to go through the motions. All right, here we go. Citizens wishing to speak during public comment time or to speak specifically on any agenda item may fill out a blue request to speak card, which looks like this, to the staff table, and you'll see Carissa to my right, your left, Carissa and Caitlin, who received those cards. Before the agenda item is to be discussed. Citizens interested in submitting a written comment on any item may submit a yellow written comments card in person, also to the staff table, to Carissa and Caitlin. When called, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. And to facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, with 1 additional minute for each individual present at the meeting who has contributed their time. I remind our audience that the board's review relates to design matters and does not include consideration of existing zoning, zoning district designations, zoning entitlements, or the allowed uses within the zoning districts. The board's motion may be to approve with modified stipulations, or what I hear people call them STIPs, to deny the request, or to continue the case. Thank you again for being here, for tuning in, and for attending, and for your interest and time. Carissa and Caitlin, if you will please call roll.
Councilmember Graham.
Present.
Vice Chair Brandt.
Here.
Board Member Joyner.
Present.
Board Member Craig.
Here.
Board Member Faki.
Here.
Board Member Mason.
Here.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
And I just want to make a comment that Board Member Ali Faki is attending telephonically tonight, so you might hear him chime in over the speakers from time to time. And I also want to take a moment. I know that this is my first meeting on my rotation from council, but I wanted to just take a brief moment to recognize Member Doug Craig. This is his final meeting. He has served you, the city of Scottsdale, for 6 years, which we appreciate. And Member Craig, if you want to make a remark, a victory speech, a victory lap?
Denied. Thank you.
Thumbs down? He votes no on saying a farewell speech. We also, last night at the City Council, we appointed 3 new members, and so Commissioner Faki and Vice Chair Brand were reappointed, and Ed Peaser will serve in Mr. Craig's place, so we're excited about that. Next item in the agenda is public comments, which I'm told for non-agendized items there are none. Staff is nodding in the affirmation, in the confirmation. So with that, we will move on to Mr. Brad Carr for today's administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Graham, and welcome to you and Commissioner Kaminsky for your rotation. Happy holidays, everybody. Just want to go over A few items today related to the agenda. First is item number 3 on your agenda is the calendar for next year. Hopefully you've noted in there that we've made some adjustments to that calendar that puts some of the hearings in different locations from what we would typically see them, which would be our first and third Thursdays of every month. For July, September, and December, because of those holidays in those months, we've adjusted those so that those meetings occur away from those holiday dates. And what that ends up doing is making some of the 2 of those meetings back to back. So we have a DRB meeting 1 week, and then directly the next week we'd have another meeting. So instead of that 2-week gap, we would have 1 week gap in July, September, and December. So take note of that. Item number 4 on your agenda, the Legacy Building A modifications. There was an update to the building elevations after publication of our staff report. Those updates should be on the dais there for you to take a look at. It's related to paint color on the eyebrow there. Applicant has agreed to change that color on the eyebrow. So any motion that you make for approval of that case should include the modifications to the elevations as presented today. Item number 6 on your agenda, DC Ranch Corporate Center, Lot 4. There was a staff memo on the dais there for you to take a look at with some revised stipulations related to replacement of any trees that may be lost during construction on the site. The applicant has agreed to that stipulation. So again, any motion you make for approval on that site should include the revised stipulation that was presented on the dais there. Item number 7 on the agenda, there was some feedback on that related to landscaping along Hayden Road. The applicant has agreed on that project to provide whatever landscaping is necessary to bring Hayden Road landscaping up to city code and above and beyond that. So any motion you make for that should include a stipulation for them to work with staff during the final plan stage to address landscaping along Hayden Road. Item number 8 on your agenda is the Jack in the Box 115 reimage. There's another staff memo on the dais related to that with the revised stipulation on the parking configuration for the site to allow for some additional landscaping. And there's a site plan that shows that update. So again, any motion for approval on item number 8 should include the revised stipulations and updated site plan. Finally, item number 9, MAC Innovation. You should have received an email, I think it was Wednesday or yesterday, regarding additional correspondence that staff has received post the publication of the staff report. These would be emails and other correspondence staff would have received with public comment on that. We did receive additional emails even after sending you that email yesterday, so those have been printed out and placed on the dais for you to take a look at as well. So if you have any questions on that, we'll answer those during the presentation of that item. Within that correspondence, there's also some additional information on the public sidewalks that are adjacent to the site, so you'll see that in there. Finally, again, I want to take a moment to recognize Mr. Board Member Craig as well for his time on the board. Thank you for your 6 years. Really appreciate it. We will miss you. We want to express our gratitude. And just again, note that you are eligible to come back to the DRB in a year if you choose to do so, if you want to take another ride on the rodeo here. We'd love to see you again on that time. So with that, Mr. Graham, that concludes my administrative report. Thank you.
Brad, just sort of a mechanical question, but you mentioned some stipulations like on the consent agenda, items 7 and 8. Would we need to withdraw those from the consent in order to add those stipulations to pass them? Is that what you were sort of suggesting?
Councilmember Graham, you can actually note that in your motion that you were actually revising the stipulations as presented today at the hearing. You don't need to pull them off the consent agenda to do so. You can just, whoever makes the motion just needs to note that those revised stipulations are part of the motion.
Okay, well then what I'll do is I'll open it to my colleagues. Several colleagues here have been part of those discussions and have led to, some of their actions and questions have led to those additional stipulations. And so I will ask if what Mr. Carr explained is satisfactory. Or if, well, first I'll just ask if anybody wants to pull anything from the consent at this time. Commissioner Kaminsky. And by the way, I didn't, if I can just say one thing, I didn't recognize Commissioner Kaminsky, who's on the Planning Commission and beginning her rotation on DRB today. So thank you for being here.
So number 4, thank you, legacy building, we don't need to pull that from consent. Number 6, DC Ranch Corporate Center, I would like to,
Hey, just a little closer.
I'm sorry. Number 4 is fine on consent. Number 6, DC Ranch Corporate Center, I'd like to have a discussion about the roof material color. Number 7, the floor and decor, thank you. There's no need to pull that from consent with the noted changes from staff. And number 8, the same, Jack in the Box on consent, no additional discussion needed on that. So I would like to hear DC Ranch.
Okay, so if I hear you'd like to withdraw number 6.
Yes,
There are numbers.
and it doesn't need a full presentation, it can just be a brief,
Okay, so you'd like a presentation, but not to withdraw it from consent agenda? Because you can do
No.
that. You can do that if you'd like. But if you want
to discuss it.
to, okay, and have a vote, and have a full vote on it separately?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll pull it from consent.
Councilmember, I'd also like to pull consent agenda item number 5, 4-DR 2023, the fire station case.
Very good. I will ask Board Member Mason, or Craig, or Joyner, Bucky, if there's a desire to pull any additional items. Okay, so items 5 and 6, Brad?
Yeah, we'll pull those. We'll have presentations on those. Before we get to any consent agenda items, I just want to make sure we get a motion for approval on the minutes before we get there.
Forgot about that.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to move to approve the regular meeting minutes of November 16th, 2023 Development Review Board meeting as presented.
Second?
We had a motion and a second. Did you second, Miss? Who was the second? Oh, it was fast draw there, okay. And we will call the roll. Just do a manual roll call? Okay, very good.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brandt,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Abstain, was not present.
Minutes approved. Thank you.
Well, let me do that. Try doing that. I guess it's okay. Okay, thank you. And so that's approval of the minutes, and now we will move on to action items. And I will ask my colleagues up here for a motion to approve the consent agenda items number 3, 4, 7, and 8. Are there any questions on the development review calendar? Anybody have any questions on that? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion then for the remaining consent agenda items 3, 4, 7, and 8.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda item 3, the Development Review Board 2024 calendar. Item 4, 43DR 2022, number 2, Legacy Building A. Consent agenda item 7, 17DR 2023, Floor and Decor, and number 8, 20DR 2023, Jack in the Box, number 115, reimage.
And I see Brad wants...
Councilman. Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I think Mr. Faki needs to recuse on number 7, so we may need to take that one separate. So if we want to do
Okay.
3, 4, and 8 first.
Okay, so we want to recast that motion to exclude 7 and to incorporate the revised stipulations.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can see these here. Yeah, no kidding.
If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Well, I think we should. Okay, 43 DR 2022, number 2, subject to the revised building elevations presented. 4 and 8, yeah, I'm trying to find it in here.
Take your time.
17 DR 2023, that's Ali's. Subject to the revised stipulations presented at the hearing and per staff recommended stipulations after finding the development review or development applications meet the applicable development review board criteria. Are there any more?
So you made a motion on items 4 and 8.
Done this, Jeff.
Excuse me, items 3, 4, and 8. Eric, Commission Attorney, was that satisfactory? Did I catch you at a bad time? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Was that motion satisfactory?
I think we got it covered as long as staff confirms that they understand the motion.
Yeah, let me just make sure. We're looking at 3, 4, and 8, with number 4
3, 4, and 8.
incorporating the revised building elevations as presented by staff, and item number 8, including the revised stipulations as presented by staff.
I'll note, Chairman Graham, that on number 4, it's DR 2020. I think Board Member Craig may have misspoken and said 2022, but it is 2020, number 2.
Very
So
good.
just for clarification
Thank
on the
you.
record.
Very good.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Board Member Craig. Is there a second?
I'll second his long motion. Good job.
Second by the Vice Chair. And Carissa, if you could call roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brand?
Yes.
Board Member Joyner?
Yes.
Board Member Craig?
Yes.
Board Member Faki?
Yes.
Board Member Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, well, I've gotten through the consent, and I will move on to, we got number 4.
Councilmember Graham, we need to do number 7 separately.
I'll
I
do a
think
motion
with
if you'd like.
Board Member
We haven't gotten through
Faki
consent.
has to, if you would recognize a recusal by Board Member Faki and then entertain a vote with the remaining board members.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Faki, we will ask for dismissal, temporary dismissal of recusal. We can't see you, but we'll take your word that you're virtually stepping out of the room. And then I will ask for a motion by one of my colleagues for item number 7.
I'd like to move to approve the development review case number 17 DR 2023 Floor and Decor with the updated landscape plan and conditions as presented by the staff for consent.
Very good. We have a motion and a second.
I'll second that.
Second by the Vice Chair. Carissa, please call roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brand?
Yes.
Board Member Joyner?
Yes.
Board Member Craig?
Yes.
Board Member Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Faki, please return. You're safe to return now. And with that, Brad, I believe now we are on the regular agenda, and I will believe we're on item number 5. If I may ask for what I suspect would be Mr. Bloomberg.
Can I make a statement real quick about
Please.
this? I don't think that we need a full presentation. I will say that the reason why this item was pulled was for discussion of the paint color. So if Mr. Bloomberg wants to make a brief presentation, I don't think that we need a full round. It's really a paint. We all love talking about paint on this board, so it's just a paint discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Brand, Commissioner Kaminsky, and board members. I'm sorry, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and board members. I'll just flip through this presentation very quickly to the elevations. So again, I'll do it. This is the fire station 612 and the well site, I think 160, case number 4 DR 2023. As far as the colors go, they are quite gray and quite cold. And we had this discussion with the applicant. It was mentioned in the first few comments letter that it's not consistent with the design guidelines. The fire department is pretty set on these colors, and I believe the architect may be as well. And one of the reasons staff is able to get behind this, probably the only reason staff is able to get behind this, is because these colors are pretty consistent with the Axon building that is going to be built to the east. So there is going to eventually be some context. Now, when that happens, it's hard to say, but the only reason that we were able to recommend approval with this color palette, which is a departure from the guidelines, is because there will be some contextual compatibility when Axon gets built. So that's where our staff's position is on that.
Has the Axon building passed through a DRB approval yet from an elevation standpoint, or is it just through zoning?
Councilmember Graham and Board Vice Chair Brand, yes, it has gone through DRB and it has gotten approval. And actually, construction plans are in the system, but they have not been approved yet. And if you want to see I have a copy of the elevations from the, let's see if I can find those real quick.
Yeah, I'm not.
Jason, I think they're right past my last slide. They should be a copy of the Axon elevations, if you could pull those up. Not there? Okay. I thought I had them in my presentation. Apparently I don't. So my apologies for that. I can probably track them down, but you'd have to probably go to another item for me to find those.
I think the one comment that I had, and I think I spoke on the phone with Mr. Carr as well about this, was just considering that we spent the better half of 3 years talking about half of our cases, talking about the color white, to see a city-funded public works project come through with a bright white paint color on the building is difficult to stomach from a board. We spend a lot of time deciphering not using Sherwin-Williams extra white, and that's completely not appropriate. So a building that's at the foot of the McDowell Mountains with no urban context or anything with it to be proposed with a bright white accent paint color I was really shocked to see that come forward in the case. I would still move that we work with staff to not have extra white, Sherwin-Williams extra white. There are 1,000 shades of white that are more palatable for this application, that you can still get the intended contrast, you can still get everything that you're looking for without going to that level of a bright white application. Even in a highlight application, which this is an accent or highlight on the building, I think still for us to be able to sit up here and to have any respect with our applications about how we talk about the color white, we can't move forward with approving a city building that has that color. So
maybe we could put this case
Member
on.
Joyner, please, sorry, yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe we could put this case on hold for 10 minutes or whatever, go to another case and allow you to find the Axiom plan, because I totally agree with Mr. Brand about this, but if we could see, I remember when we approved the Axiom building, but I don't remember we did any bright white. So could you maybe have somebody find that file, and then maybe we go to the next case and then come back to this one?
Councilmember Graham and Board Member Joyner, I'm pretty certain there aren't any whites on the Axon building. The main reason why I had the Axon elevations on my mind is more because of the grays. I don't think, I'm happy to go find them, but so if you guys want to do it in the next item and then come back to this, that's fine.
if the board is okay, I'd be okay with making a motion to approve to work with staff to find a white that is in the applicable range of prior approved projects that are within this site context. So I'm okay with doing that. And I think that gives staff hopefully the leverage to move forward and find something in the 75 LRV range of similar projects that we've approved. So should I go ahead and make a motion? Or do we have any discussion?
We have more questions, but I think you made a motion.
No, I didn't.
No.
Okay.
You just said.
You're expressing your intent. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. No, it's a very good point, and I want to call on Commissioner Kaminsky, please.
I actually had concerns about the gray and the colors of the building, and also wanted to make note about some conversations that I'd had with staff about the landscape design as well. I recognize the site has a lot of infrastructure challenges in trying to accommodate existing stormwater drainage through the property. And I had hoped we'd get some landscaping along the street front rather than just a all culvert on two sides. I understand that in order to connect the two driveways with a conduit that would provide earth and plants between the two driveways would be an additional $120,000 roughly to the project. So that was chosen to not landscape that area, but leave a 45-foot wide culvert along the street front. Along the other side of the building, the wall, I had asked possibly to have that staggered so that some of the landscape could be street front or viewed from the public rather than put behind the wall. Again, my concern being we have a huge culvert along the street or along the edge, and rather than move the wall back to provide landscape at the street front, we've put all of that behind it. So I just wanted to make note of that, because I think it's a shame for a city building to end up not meeting the design objectives that we hold other people to. And to the color comment, we have design standards related to desert sensitivity. And in this area, looking at what else is built in the area, even if you were to keep gray, there are thousands of shades of gray. You could have some warm tones that brought in some of the earth tones from the area. And my concern is, regardless of what was approved on an adjacent site that may come back for changes in the future, this is going to set precedents. And as a city project, to be the first building in this area, we're setting the tone and the color for this area. It will be precedents. And if we're disregarding our own design guidelines for a city project, how can we hold private sector to doing that? So that's my concern with the gray, and I share the concerns on the white as well.
Commissioner Kaminsky, if you like, I can have the architect or the project manager come up and maybe address a few of your comments if you like. Otherwise,
Sure.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I'm Matt Gorman, architect of record for this project with Arrington Watkins Architects. To address some of these colors, as Greg stated, we were initially given direction by the city to match the Axon colors to make a compatible assembly of buildings that would inhabit this area. And so that's where the grays come from initially, and then we had a much broader, more interesting red and white combination that has been scaled back because of budget. The red and the white really come from the identity of the fire department, right? Scottsdale is unique in the valley in that they have white fire trucks, brilliant white fire trucks that are their identity with a red stripe on them. And so, queuing off of that, we decided that we would utilize white for the canopies and for the doors, and then there's a little bit of striping red color that goes into the canopies, which further reinforces that identity of this as a fire department. And it also picks up white, which in my mind is the civic building color of Scottsdale. We're sitting in a white, brilliant white building. We're currently remodeling the courts in District 2. It's a brilliant white building, right? That is part of the identity of Scottsdale civic architecture. Additionally, the fire department is currently redoing the training facility. The training facility is gray with white and red trim, right? So it goes into that identity of the organization, the reinforcement of who they are, the ability to drive by and understand these are our firefighters, right? So I think that's part of the argument for utilizing the white. When the comments were initially provided to me that we needed to provide, warm desert colors. I fully recognize that that is in the general zoning ordinance. However, we are in the airport overlay district. The airport overlay district contains a lot of language about modern, tech, right, high-end, and it really is looking for something that's a little different than your typical Scottsdale brown house. So in my rebuttal to Greg about the colors, I included photographs of many buildings within the airport overlay district that contain red and white as feature elements of their facades, as an explanation to say, look, there are these other buildings that have the same colors in our same overlay. I think it's fair game that we could use those colors at this location within the same zoning overlay. So I'll just throw that out there as well. Do you have any other questions? I know you mentioned the landscape. I think if you go to, can you go to the slide that shows the aerial? Because I think it's important. Yeah, so I think you just from here, we see the roadway south of us and then Hayden Road, right? So what we're doing is we're building a riprap channel in front of the building as a means of moving that water. The other side of the road alongside the condos is all riprap channel for that entire length. For a half a mile south on Hayden Road, it is also a riprap channel. It's constructed exactly the same way as what we're constructing. We're really within the bounds of what exists. I don't think, we would love to put more plants in there, but the reality is that, water movement will destroy them. They will block stuff up, create dams. There's just a lot of challenges. Once this property to the north of us is developed, that need for that whole drainage channel would go away, right? And the city could come back and remove that riprap and plant trees. I know that's a hard thing to think about, but we're just caught in being the first ones in this development. We're trap handling all the water for the undeveloped land and trying to deal with the landscaping for what's, because there isn't all this other stuff. If those properties were already developed, we wouldn't have this drainage problem at all. So it's really a response to a challenge that we didn't create.
Yeah, please, Commissioner Kaminsky.
Sorry, I had some follow-up questions. I just wanted to clarify with regard to the paint. You said that originally staff had asked you to use desert tones, and then later staff directed you to use the colors of the Axion project.
No, the first comment was they pointed to the zoning ordinance, and they said the zoning ordinance has warm desert colors, right? I think what I said earlier was we were directed by our client organization and city management to match Axon, so that didn't come from planning and zoning.
Okay.
That came from city management, and so that was the starting point, and so we can debate the validity of that, but.
Could it be possible to warm those grays up by providing a warmer tone?
Yeah, certainly there are, there's like 16 browns in block. This is integrally colored block.
Which I
and
appreciate.
we could warm it up, right? Right now it's 2 gray tones. We have samples if you want to see the actual thing. I know renderings never ever represent what the thing looks like, but yeah, it is possible that we can adjust those tones, be a little warmer.
So that would go a long way for me, and I appreciate the integral colored block because that's a more sustainable solution than paint.
I think that in particular is less of interest to the fire department. They like the red and white because that's part of who they are, right?
Okay, with regard to the culverts, I would hope that we wouldn't be aspiring to what's already there in the past as opposed to presenting a face of Scottsdale that's looking to the future.
Sure.
So if we can't afford to do conduits with landscape, and we know that in the future it would be a major budget issue to go back and do conduits with landscape. At a minimum, along the top toe of those culverts, you could have some low-growing vegetation that cascaded down that would cover some of that rock, so it's not all rock. A 45-foot wide channel is a pretty wide channel.
Yes.
That would also cool. It would shade some of that rock, so I'm also concerned about heat absorption of this huge area that's effectively functioning like the raw side of a mountain with no
Yeah.
vegetation. So if there's anything you could do to modify the landscape plan that would provide some shade over the culvert in ground cover or trees, I think that would also help, and it would soften the frontage on both sides.
You're correct. We could plant some creeping landscape, and I think that would be, along the perimeter, and that would be not of a concern to my civil engineer, who's all about water flow. And I didn't mean to imply that we just wanted to do the same. I just meant to imply that we were not doing something that was worse than what had been accepted in the past, and that we weren't it wouldn't stand out, right? Like, it's just going to continue to look like the rest of Hayden Road. So,
Any more questions? Thank you. Roger, your name you said?
huh?
What
Matt?
was Matt.
Yeah.
Oh, Packis is Roger. Sorry about that. Thanks, Matt. Any more questions? Board Member Joyner.
Yes, I have a question. I live in North Scottsdale, and I happen to love the brown and the fact that we merge in with, and I'm not even remotely interested in introducing bright white into that area. If we look at this drawing right here, there is tremendous development that's going to be coming in over
Sure.
I don't know how many years. I served on Board of Adjustment for 4 years in Chandler, and once you do one exception, then everybody else wants the same exception. Commissioner Brand has a gazillion times said how many shades of white there are, and I can't help but think you could find, and by the way, I love the fire department, I respect the fire department, I love everything that they do, but I don't want bright white. So I would support the motion that you work with staff and soften the colors.
To continue?
And maybe continue it and let us see it again or whatever, but, and do away with the bright white, because if we grant it to you, we're going to have 27 applicants asking for the same thing, and that whole area is going to be bright white. So those are just my comments.
Member Craig, did you have anything to add?
It's my last day. Come on.
Right, come on.
You're not already checked out, are you?
I would not suggest we continue the case because I know that they're on a timeline too, but I would agree with Board Member Brand that we look at the white and that the applicant works with staff to get it into a compliance to that 75 LRV.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am open to a continuance because this does seem to be a pretty strong precedential decision, and I will invite Member Faki if he cares to add any questions or commentary.
I think, I'm okay with the applicant working with staff. I think if we can soften the white, this could be addressed, and I trust staff could work with the applicant on this so we can keep the project going. From my side, I don't see a need for continuance as well. I will be supportive of Board Member Brand motion here.
Member, okay, and I just want to ask Member Mason, do you have any?
I agree with the comments on toning the white down. I think that could accomplish the same thing. The contrast between the whiteness and the red is what you're looking for. And in the desert, bright white can be really bright, and cream white can also look really bright. And I think that's what we're looking at here. It's not something that's blazing, something that's more tone but maintains the contrast you're looking for.
Okay, and then I'm going to go to the Vice Chair and then back to Commissioner Kaminsky.
I was going to look at moving, Commissioner Kaminsky, I don't know if you want to make the motion, or if I do,
She might have stipulations.
or do you have additional stipulations? Okay.
Yes. I'd like to suggest these in lieu of the idea of a continuance, if it's acceptable. One thing to clarify, because it appears we have different staff giving different direction to the applicant. When I refer to staff, it's planning staff, not city management or fire staff. So I have 3 conditions. The first is to work with planning staff to modify the bright white to a lighter shade of white. The second one would be to work with planning staff to use warm grays rather than the cool grays that are more in keeping with the desert tones. And the third would be to work with planning staff to add landscape to soften the edges of the culverts along both frontages.
So I hear a motion, and
Move to approve if that's okay.
yes, and I will invite a second.
I would second that.
Okay, and I just have a few questions, or I want to make a couple comments, and then I'll call the roll. We took this case up from a zoning perspective in the city council this week, and I asked about the building appearance, and they said that they had moved away from something that was axon and towards something that was more consistent with other fire stations. But this one seems to have elements that are a departure from, that are inconsistent with other fire stations across the city and that particular area. Is that correct, Matt?
No, I would disagree with that. I think if you look at, for example, 603, what these elements that are sticking out, the canopies are perforated metal to allow the light to come through and create shadow and shading on all the materials and really be lower impact visually and create some interest. And if you go to look at 603, for example, it has horizontal canopies that come out and they're perforated metal, and they do very similar thing to what's on here. So I think
is the coloration similar to 603?
603 is beige with more of a purple.
But the design
canopies,
features, okay.
So it is a mix of integrally colored block and stucco. So yeah, it's more in line with that one.
Okay.
Previously, we had something which is more like the Axon, which I like to call Crash Spaceship in the Desert. I think that's their theme. It has giant angular planes of metal. Their colors are gray and black and safety yellow. And so when we looked at this, we had canopies that were far more jutting, and they were big sheets of metal that is, mechanically coated in red and white.
Okay.
So it was fun.
Well, very good. Well, I think that the Commissioner Kaminsky's motion seems satisfactory to the board, and appreciate, Matt, you answering those questions and explaining some of those topics. And I will invite Carissa to call the roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brandt?
Yes.
Board Member Joyner?
Yes.
Board Member Craig?
Yes.
Board Member Faki?
Yes.
Board Member Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you again. And appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that will conclude item number 5, and we'll move on, Brad, to item number 6. I believe we'll be hearing from Waylon Barton.
And Councilmember Graham, just real quickly, I've asked Mr. Barton to just go to the building elevations, start the conversation there, because I feel like that's what's most pertinent as far as what the questions are right now.
Very good.
Right, good afternoon, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, members of DRB. This is the case for DC Ranch Corporate Center, Lot 4, the case coordinator, Wayland. I'm jumping through to the elevations. I understand there's some concerns over the color palette, color scheme for this building. The applicant, Dale, is here as well, so I'll just kind of quickly go over staff's input. During review, the predominant cool gray and black color scheme was identified to the applicant to encourage a revision to incorporate some of those warmer earth tones, but through the review process with Dale, the architect, he made mention there that the colors are compatible with some of the other buildings within the DC Ranch Corporate Center. Additionally, they have received DC Ranch approval for the proposal. So through some additional dialogue, Dale here has brought a physical board to share with you to go over those colors. As you may have noticed here, the renderings aren't super accurate, so we do have a physical board for you. I'm also available for questions, but for now I think I can hand over to Dale to address any additional questions you may have, but he also has a PowerPoint for you. Thanks.
Oh, that's good too, actually. Yeah, I'll use it, or the context. Sorry, the barn imagery. Right. Hi. First of all, Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky and board members, I'm Dale Garden with Dale Garden Design, 20885 North 90th Place, Scottsdale. I've been involved in design and review and design in DC Ranch for over 25 years, and think this project is stemmed in rooting back to some of the more Western regional imagery that we showed. So in this particular case, we're showing some of the darker schemes and is consistent with recent approvals of Lot 12, Lot 14 that we brought before you in the last 2 months, both of which have been approved with grays and black accents and black metal accents. So if you've all had an opportunity to drive through the corporate center, I think it's an exciting spot because it's an industrial complex that has now, I think, eclipsed design far beyond any other industrial park in Scottsdale. And it comes back to the heritage of DC Ranch, showing Western regional buildings, and this particular one has used it's utilizing corrugated metal for texture, and we're very concerned about metal and sheen, so you're seeing matte black as the selected color for the roof to give an accent and subtle contrast to the walls. The walls are shown with either the darker grays or what's called VM zinc, both matte. So with very little information about what the concerns are, I'll try to answer any questions. I also have context photos of other projects that have been recently approved, including directly across the street has a very dark charcoal black metal siding on the face of the building and the roof. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Dale. I will see if there are any questions among my colleagues. Vice Chair?
I don't have questions, but I did want to say, seeing it's funny, just seeing it up on the board or seeing it on the board versus seeing it on the screen. I actually think that I did not know that you were using that product for the wall panel, the zinc, which has got a vertical striation to the metal, and it comes off as a much warmer gray. I've seen that installed multiple times, and I think the matte black is actually, it is dark, but I've consistently seen roofing material and even wall panels show up much lighter visually because of the reflectance
Sheen.
off that, because of the reflectance and sheen. So in seeing the materials here, I'm actually in support, and it showcases more of the high quality that the building is delivering, but I'll turn to
Appreciate that.
Dale, do you agree that it's going to appear that way when it's actually after installation?
Absolutely, and to be honest, we're still even researching other materials. There's new materials every day, but there's other ones that are mimicking the VM zincs now, so we're trying to find ones that have a very dull finish. That's on the walls.
Okay. Let me see if there's Commissioner Kaminsky, please.
I love the design. It's very elegant. It's beautiful. My only concern was the black on the roof.
Sure.
Just felt if we could do a slightly lighter gray, it would be more appropriate to the environment we're in. When I think of the black, maybe the Pacific Northwest or some other context, but in the desert, I don't know what DC Ranch originally looked like. I'm imagining something with like a corrugated metal roof of a regular light color.
We use darker, richer materials in Market Street if you've been there. And again, have you been to the site recently?
Not recently.
You will see other dark metals being utilized that are trying to bring a richer, deeper color palette. And like I say, I think in a very intriguing way. So I appreciate the concern. The matte finish hopefully also addresses part of your concern, because if we were using a high sheen metal as discussed, that comes off even worse in terms of depth of color. So we think the standing seam that gives shade and shadow with the ribs, along with the matte finishes are going to be very compatible. And the reason the roof is slightly darker is we didn't want the walls and the roof being the same appearance. So they're subtly different, as you can see on the board, but giving what I think is a very complementary contrast of roof to wall. So that's why we're pleased with the with the presentation that we've had and the communication with staff working through these thoughts and topics.
Is the roof darker than other buildings in DC Ranch?
If I can pull up some site photos here that I brought in today, not knowing this was going to get pulled, but I'll try to show some site photos of things that might help you see some of the other. I mean, directly to our west, it's dark charcoal black
Is it
metal roofs.
As dark? Or?
As dark fascias.
Okay.
But they may have trouble pulling this up because I just handed them a jump drive when this got pulled.
I appreciate the
So,
effort.
but
Thank
anyway,
you.
and that's directly to our west, and directly to our south is a recent building that LG just finished that is more like a dark bronze that put dark bronze and black together, and it's very hard to tell the difference. So apologize. If they find photos, we'll show them, but otherwise, hopefully you can consider the topic.
Commissioner Kaminsky, is that satisfactory?
Yes, thank you.
I hate to put her on the spot. Chris Irish, Director of Public Affairs.
I think I can speak for that because both the DC Ranch Community Council and the DC Ranch Covenant Commission have approved these both through prelim and final.
Yeah, I was just putting Chris Irish, Director of DC Ranch Public Affairs, if okay. She confirmed that. I didn't want to put you on the spot. I know you're here for another project, but since we have your talents here.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and members of the board, I'm Chris Irish, and I do serve as the DC Ranch Director of Public Affairs. But I can tell you that this project has been through the DC Ranch Covenant Commission, was approved with the colors. Dale is correct. In our corporate center, we've used a lot of different colors that maybe we don't have all over DC Ranch. It has a little bit more of a contemporary look, and this would blend in very nicely with what we already have there and a couple new buildings that are going in.
Again, didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but thank you for jumping to the opportunity. So, I will ask remaining colleagues if there are any questions or comments they'd like to add. Board Member Craig or Joyner, Mason.
I do like the look of the roof. I think it's gives a nice contrast with the ridging you put on it.
Thank you.
I think that helps out. Since it is consistent with the other roofs in the area, as you pointed out, then I think it's a good addition.
Very good. Appreciate that.
Thank you, and I will just ask Member Faki if you have anything to add. Just blink twice
I'm
if you
good
don't. Okay.
I'm good from my side, Councilman.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite. That was a little bit unintelligible. What was that?
I said I'm good from my side.
Okay.
Nothing to add.
Very good. Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion from one of my colleagues for this item.
I'll make a motion. How do we do this? I'm going to move to approve item number 6, 10-DR-2023. With the, per the staff for the staff recommended stipulations after finding the development application meets the applicable development review board criteria.
Brad, is that a satisfactory motion?
Just want to ask the motion maker if that includes the staff additional stipulations were provided today on the dais.
It does.
Thank you.
Do you need him to say that, to state that? Okay, very good. We have a motion, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Kaminsky. Thank you, and we will call the roll. Carissa?
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Very good. We are unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, for talking to us today. Thank you, Wayland, wherever you went. There you are, for being willing to present. And that concludes item number 6. And we will move on to what would have been our regular agenda, item number 9 out of 10. And I see we have today Chris Zimmer is going to talk to us. Thank you. Please begin.
Hello, and thank you, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and members of the Development Review Board. I'm Chris Zimmer. I'm a planner here with the city. I'm pinch hitting for Meredith Tessier, who did the review and report, but I've been along through the process, so know most of it. Here again, I'm here today to present to you case 49DR 2022 to number 2, the Mac Innovation Park, Scottsdale Phase 1. This agenda item is on the regular agenda, as staff has received public comments both in support and opposition in this request. Here's a context aerial of the site. You'll see the existing surroundings for it. The associated improvements will be north of the East Bell Road, east of the Loop 101, south of Pima Road, and west of the now existing and proposed 91st Street. Just to mention, the board did receive another updated attachment on the dais for attachment 1. We just mislabeled Pima Road as 91st, so I just wanted to mention that. Again, here is the detailed area of the subject site. You'll see that associated improvements for this are highlighted in yellow and is surrounded by the DC Ranch Park to the west over there, the storage facility, and the Bell Sports Complex fields. To the west is Industrial Parks mixed use, and then also to the north is the vacant state land and current mixed use as well, which includes commercial and multifamily uses. The subject site is zoned Industrial Park Plan Community Development, I-1 PCD, which does allow for industrial type uses. The I-1 PCD zoning has been in place since 1986 and is surrounded by industrial zonings, as you can see. Here's the proposed phasing plan. Again, a majority of the improvements are focused on the northern part of the site, but do include surrounding infrastructure improvements. Here's a proposed site plan of the associated improvements. You can see that the improvements there are access to the frontage Loop 101 to the east. We have access south of Pima Road, and then there's also another planned access on 91st. Here's a copy of the proposed landscape plan, which includes trees to be provided on site. The applicant will go into a little bit more detail on the specifics of the design for the landscape plan. And then I'm just going to kind of briefly go through some of the building elevations. Again, the applicant has provided a little bit more detail in regards to the building elevations, their design. So here's the building elevation for A. This is building B. We have building elevation C here, and then building D. Here are some perspectives of the proposed development. This is off of Pima Road, what it would look like. And then this is another perspective off of Bell. Here are the key items of consideration that the board, we would like the board to take a look at. Again, looking at this, replacing existing washes with significant structural drainage improvements, the scenic corridor along North Pima and Frontage Road. Development is comprised of future phases. The future phases will return to the DRB for further review and approval. And then we've, again, received public comment both in support and opposition of this case. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant has provided another presentation as well, and is here. Jason and his team can answer any questions for you guys, and same with staff as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And what's more customary, if I can ask my colleagues, will public comment or the applicant's presentation first, Brad.
Councilmember Graham, we typically hear from the applicant first.
Very good.
In public comment, and then the applicant's given an opportunity to address public comment after.
Okay, so I'll invite Jason Morris, applicant, on behalf of the applicant. And you have 3 minutes. I'm just kidding. How long does he have, Brad? 10 minutes? 10.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Jason Morris with you, Morris, on behalf of the applicant. Very much appreciate the opportunity to present this. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible because, frankly, I think it's more important that we hear from the team on this in terms of architecture, engineering, and traffic mitigation. So in looking at this, the initial comments I'd like to make on behalf of the team, on behalf of MAC, the developer of this site, is that this is the single biggest effort at a DR case that I think the city has seen. This is an unusual case for the DR board to be hearing. And that is because of the size, the complexity, but also the scarcity of this type of product within the city of Scottsdale. So I'm going to go, you're obviously very familiar with the site. You've had a chance to take a look at your packets, and you understand we are speaking tonight of only a portion of the overall site, approximately 65 acres within the larger context of the site that was purchased from the State Land Department. I mentioned the purchase from the State Land Department because that really is important to understand in the context of the application that's in front of you. This was offered by the state as an I-1 parcel, 124 acres within the city of Scottsdale. You know how rare of a parcel that would be. And as we talk about, frankly, I-1 in this area being a rarity, but recognizing between the runway location, the rest of the industrial in this area, and the transportation system for the regional basis, I-1 is essential for this area, which is why you're seeing this as a DR case and not as I think some would prefer to treat it as a zoning case, but obviously we're not doing that. And in fact, this zoning now dates back, this is a 1988 map. We heard from staff this was a 1986 case, so essentially 37 years of this zoning in place with the future planning knowing the importance of having industrial land available to the city, employment-based land in this area. As we move forward, let's see if we can. I'll just. To 1996, you see there was development in the area, but not necessarily residential development. Talks about and talks to the employment location in this area and the lack of other development while this was I-1. As we move to 2000, it's still surprising to see the lack of development in this area, but the consistency of the I-1 and the beginning of what we see as the perimeter center taking advantage of that I-1 zoning back from 37 years ago. So we look at where we stand today. The site itself is primed for industrial development, and in speaking with the city, both at the council level and at the economic development level, have a sense of why that is important and vital to this site moving forward with a use that may not be available elsewhere within the city of Scottsdale. And I say that because, frankly, less than 3% of the land, or I'm sorry, slightly more than 3% of the land is available for employment uses. But of that land within the city of Scottsdale, a very small portion of it is undeveloped land, and almost none of it, in fact, this is somewhat of a unicorn, is of this size and development ability. So in terms of what we're developing and what we're delivering to the city of Scottsdale, this is an imperative. We look at where that land now exists. It really is largely in the airport area, but we wanted to give you a sense of this industrial node within the city of Scottsdale and the role it could play within the city of Scottsdale. If you look at the location of this, it's not by accident. It's essentially in the middle of the city limits, adjacent to the 101. It complies with both the general plan, the underlying zoning ordinance, and the gateway character area for all of the individual development concerns and dictates. So when we're bringing a case in front of you, we are not asking for amended development standards. We are looking at this as a pure DR case. The zoning map has already been discussed in terms of what we're in proximity to. And really, with that, I think it's more important that you hear from the rest of the team, because I know you'll all have individual questions about the different disciplines that have come together to bring this case forward. And I'll remain available if you have additional questions. The last thing I will talk about is the outreach. And I'm grateful, Chris Irish actually pointed out in her letter the amount of outreach that has been done to DC Ranch and the surrounding communities. I point that out because of the fact that before we applied to DR with the city of Scottsdale, our first call when this sale was made from the state to MAC reached out to the surrounding communities to talk about what would come in the form of an application, but also to talk about options for this site, which frankly resulted in a 4-month conversation with different perspectives, different ideas, different concepts for this parcel before we moved forward with the DR case that you're seeing today. With that, I'm happy to introduce the design team, starting with the engineering team. Steve. Mr. Heen. You can, that's probably better to click. The wall isn't as sensitive.
Got it. Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and board members, Steve Haney with Kimley Horn. There are quite a few conditions and constraints associated with this site that make development challenging, as this graphic depicts. We work extensively with staff and other stakeholders to come up with prudent design solutions for these site challenges as it relates to topography and grading, the drainage and floodwater, and the presence of some fairly extensive water, sewer, and aerial power infrastructure. We're here today for phase 1 of the project, shown here in blue. The blue area includes all the major backbone infrastructure for the overall site, not just for phase 1. So phase 1 includes all off-site street improvements, all major drainage improvements, and all the site's perimeter amenities and vegetation. So one of the challenges I mentioned was the topography and grading. And this site has over 50 feet of vertical fall from north to south. The site is also in an AO flood zone, which requires certain precautions to protect buildings from floodwaters. The team worked diligently to adhere to these more restrictive grading requirements in this flood zone designation while limiting the vertical projection of the site. The finished floors are oriented in a direction that reduce the vertical impact, and each building is stepped with the site's natural topography so they're as close to natural grade as they can be. So the AO flood zone and the 50 feet of a vertical drop across the site dictated the building's layout and orientation. The buildings need to have an east-west orientation with the contours of the site to be able to keep their height and visual impact to an absolute minimum. As you can see on this graphic, each building is stepped down 6 feet from the adjacent building going from north to south. Another of the challenges was that I mentioned was drainage, and significant stormwater from the watershed above this site has been channelized with development, and it now enters this site via channels, culverts at various locations under the existing roads. The stormwater currently flows
uncontrolled across this site, where it ultimately floods over Bell Road in multiple locations. So our project will take this uncontrolled flow, it'll route it in some man-made arroyos through and around the site, and it'll discharge to a box culvert that is under Bell Road at the Loop 101 and is sized to accommodate this flow. So this will eliminate the repeated flooding that's currently being experienced over Bell Road from the Loop 101 to about 93rd Street. And then, of course, I mentioned some significant existing infrastructure. The northern portion of this site has some critical water and sewer infrastructure running north to south in the old Pima Road alignment, and it consists of many water mains, sewer mains, and force mains of various sizes. So our team worked with staff to protect this existing infrastructure in place and provide an overall site design that was sensitive to its critical nature. So we're providing a wider corridor than the existing old Pima Road alignment, adding some generous buffers. We're limiting drainage and excavation over the surface of the areas that contain these utilities. We're providing ample space for access if needed by city forces, and we're leaving an unencumbered corridor within this area should additional infrastructure be needed by the city in the future. So now I'll turn it over to Rick Butler to talk more about the project specifics.
Good afternoon, members of the board.
Thank you for being here. I just want to ask Brad, we've kind of expired on time, and so you encourage me to enjoin presenters to move expeditiously?
Yeah, Councilmember Graham, it's up to your discretion. You're as the chair.
Okay, well, very good. Well, please share your presentation with us, but I just want to be respectful. Do have a number of cards. People want to, I got a lot of.
Okay.
So,
good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Rick Butler, Butler Design Group, 5013 East Washington and Phoenix. I got a lot to cover, so I'm going to power through these slides. My firm has done a lot of projects in this area, including the adjacent AJs to the north, and we did the Village Health Club and DC Ranch. We've also done millions of square feet of this product type, actually tens of millions of feet, actually in the valley and around the country, mostly in Arizona, of this product type. We're considered experts in this product type. That said, we knew, this design team knew getting into this project it was going to be unlike anything we'd done. The design team, with our design team and Mac, our client, we knew with the adjacency of being in North Scottsdale, its location, DC Ranch, the adjacent neighborhood, that this would be unlike any other industrial development that we had done. So we went into this project knowing that. I can tell you that we've never done, with all the millions of feet of project of this type, a project with so much design scrutiny and detailing, both with the site constraints, the architecture, we had the power lines and easements that Steve talked about, landscaping and the drainage to talk about, and I hope at the end of this presentation you will agree. So on the site plan, we're used to dealing with industrial parks that are generally flat. As Steve indicated, we have 52 feet of fall across the site, so right off the bat we had major site design concerns. The north phase, the 4 buildings, actually has 17 feet of finished floor fall, and that's unheard of on a development like this. The second phase to the south is going to have 13 feet of finished floor stepping, which is very difficult and quite challenging to deal with. We've dealt with the drainage by creating heavily landscaped, natural-looking arroyos along the streetscape to make it really an amenity to the project. We've used the majority of the native trees and cactus on the streetscape based on what we heard from neighbors and the city. 344 native trees are going to be replaced, most of them on the street front, 29 cactus. The site plan really has a shared truck course between building A and B and C and D to try and screen them as much as we can from surrounding uses, fully screened on each end with 8-foot masonry walls. Click ahead, that's a blow up. So you got all the truck courts in between with 8-foot walls on each end. I think the renderings will do this a little bit more justice. We have corner entries with 2-story glass and middle entries for divisibility of this product type. This is a blow up of the corner entry, and again, I think the 3D images that I will show you will actually do it a little bit more justice. The buildings tend to be more, they are concrete tilt-up buildings, 2-story glass, native stone accents, a hint of Wrightian architecture with Taliesin in the area, steel, and the steel elements with the battered form to it. I think I dropped. So here's the rendering of the multi-use trail along Pima, heavily landscaped. Keep in mind the setbacks normally in a developed industrial park are typically a 20-foot setback along a street. So we have along Pima, 100-foot setback and 50 feet along the west and along Bell. So it's quite a bit of landscaping and significant native landscaping being replaced. This is the view looking northeast from Bell, corner entry blow up. And I would tell you that I'm going to blow through this and we can answer any of the questions that you have afterwards. Middle entry. So we have the middle entry on each of the buildings. And then this is a view along Pima Road, heavily vegetated, big setbacks. Color material palette, we worked extensively with staff to change the colors. They're similar to what we had, but we worked on the color palette with staff, and this is what we've come up with to really tie in with that area and also with the mountains in the background. Native stone. And then we've got landscape and screen walls to tie into the architecture. Daniel from Laskin and Associates is here as well. So if you have detailed landscape questions, we can dig into that after the presentation as well. And then we've incorporated a number, I'm not going to read through these obviously, but a number of the green building program standards into the project. And then I'm going to I think you're going to take it from here.
Yeah, I've been a very poor clock disciplinarian, so.
So with that, Mr. Chair, I know there'll be questions regarding traffic and other things.
Thank you, Rick.
We have our design professionals. We have Chuck Wright here to talk about traffic. As you heard, we have Daniel from Laskin Associates to talk about landscaping. Rather than make that presentation to you, and again, I apologize for the clock management of this, but this is not one building on one site, which is what you typically would see. So thank you for the discretion. And we'll keep the rest of the team available based upon the speakers and the questions you have.
Councilman Graham.
Thank you, Jason. Member Joyner?
I would like to respectfully ask for some more time to hear from the traffic engineer, since that's...
From the staff?
No, he said they had their traffic expert to do a presentation on traffic. I would really like to hear that before, is that person here?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Steve is not a traffic engineer, correct? Steve Haney?
No, he is the project engineer. Chuck Wright with Kimley Horn is the traffic engineer.
Okay, why don't we, is the board agreeable to that request? Okay, why don't we, if he would present 3 or 4 minutes to us before we can start. I just don't want to, is the gentleman here?
Yeah, he's right here. He's reluctantly sitting there. Come on up.
Oh, it's the gentleman in the blue
Yeah.
who's jonesing
Yeah.
to talk to us.
He thought he had dodged that bullet.
Okay, I just want to,
actually, you want to go there?
I don't want to keep people here past dinner, and I've got a lot of cards to get through, and so thank you for your presentation, sir. If you could just state your name.
Council member, commissioner, board members, for the record, my name is Chuck Wright, Kimley Horn and Associates, 7740 North 16th Street. We have done a tremendous amount of work on the traffic for the site. This exhibit is sort of the overview. In addition to the buildings that are depicted on this graphic, we've included in our analysis the additional areas between the power line corridor and the park, the northwest corner of 91st and Bell, and the corner parcels adjacent to the industrial along Pima Road. So we did do a very detailed traffic analysis, including all of the potential uses in the area. It was a unique opportunity to collaborate with both the city and the Arizona Department of Transportation because different segments of these roadways are actually under different jurisdictions. So for the improvements along the Pima Road frontage and the intersection of Pima and the 101, ADOT had a very active role in taking a look at alternatives and recommending the final configuration. The city of Scottsdale similarly was the key player on 91st Street, Bell Road, and Pima Road as we were looking through those opportunities. The improvements and the access that's provided incorporates the extension of 91st Street from Bell Road at that existing signal and continuing to the current termination of 91st Street, which provides access to and from the south on Bell Road. There's an additional access point off of Bell Road between 91st and the Loop 101. We've identified and coordinated with ADOT on a ride-in, ride-out connection on the northbound frontage road. As we continue north through our ADOT coordination, we've identified the improvement of the frontage road to go from.
I think it'll help if you go to the next slide. Just click on there. Oops. There we go. So.
Oh, okay.
And you've got, I think, 3 or 4 more
Yes.
slides.
So here are the improvements at Bell and 91st Street. We've provided additional turn storage and right turn lanes on the new north leg of 91st. The new driveway that aligns with 90th Street similarly has exclusive turn lanes and additional left turn storage. If I can get these. There we go. The frontage road is going to be modified to provide for 2 lanes on the frontage road, whereas today it's a single lane as you continue north approaching Pima Road. At the intersection of Pima and the 101, we've actually taken and added a second exclusive northbound right turn lane. So that one of the busiest movements at the intersection is this right turn lane coming off of the freeway and continuing up Pima Road. So the existing signal lane is going to be doubled in capacity for that right turn movement. And again, we talked about a dedicated turn for the driveway off of that frontage road as well. And on Pima Road to the northeast, there's an additional access point that'll be right in, right out, in and out of the site. And we will have 4 lanes on Pima Road for this segment between the 101 frontage road intersection and this driveway to further increase the capacity. So the improvements that the site is providing are quite significant. And again, we've worked very closely with ADOT and the city in identifying those improvements to be able to take a look at the additional traffic and ameliorate those potential impacts with additional capacity. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them now.
Thank you. Please stick around. Keep your clock running. And I think from now, at this point, we'll turn over to public comment. I want to thank Attorney Jason Morris, Engineer Steve Haney, Architect Rick Butler, Traffic Engineer Chuck Wright for talking to us, presenting on the project. I'm anticipating at least an hour of questions from my colleagues up here, and I've got 15 cards at 3 minutes each, plus time between is going to be about another hour there, 2 hours. So I'm thinking I might reduce it to 2 minutes per comment card, if that's acceptable. If you go over a little bit, that's fine. But that's what I think I'm going to start to do, if that's acceptable to the audience. I want to start with Chris Irish, and if you want more time, you can have more time. Okay. I promise I'm not here. In fact, what I'm trying to do is give more people a chance to be heard. I want everyone to be heard today, and I don't want people to lose steam, because I want the applicants to be able to hear all the commissioners' questions and for everyone to have a chance to air support or grievances with the project. So I promise I'm not trying to cut anybody off. So if you want additional time, please let me know. Chris, your card was attached with a few others, so can I trust that means that they're donating your time, their time to you?
Correct. I had 3 other people that donated a minute to me.
Okay, so let's give you 5 minutes. Is that enough time, Chris?
I hope so.
Okay, Chris is DC Ranch Public Affairs Director, and thank you for being here.
Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and members of the board, thank you for your time today. As you know, my name is Chris Irish. The address is 20551 North Pima Road, Suite 180. I serve as DC Ranch's Director of Public Affairs, and I'm here today representing the 7,000 plus Scottsdale residents who live in DC Ranch. As you saw in some of the earlier slides, DC Ranch is the closest neighbor to the Mack Industrial Development. The Mack Company has done a good job in keeping DC Ranch updated on their project. They held several open houses, where, as you might imagine, they received a lot of feedback. They were patient in listening to residents' concerns, and they received what I would say probably at least 50 recommendations for changes. And to date, and to the best of my knowledge, I believe the MAC has made only 3 changes that were recommended. They worked with the city to make the northern portion of 91st Street that is next to DC Ranch Homes a designated no truck zone. They added roof parapets so that the mechanical equipment would be better shielded, and they increased the size of the trees along Pima Road. So we are grateful for those 3 changes. Unfortunately, the Mack Company has not been receptive to what DC Ranch, Ironwood Village, and many, many others considered to be 3 very important design and site layout changes. And since both design and site layout changes fall under your authority, DC Ranch is hopeful that you will agree with us and ask the developer to make these changes and then resubmit their proposal. So the first, and I've never used an Elmo before, so I'm hoping, I'm hoping this works out.
I don't know if you zoom in or if someone on staff does. That's obviously a bit too small for most people to read.
Okay, yeah, and it looks a little hard to see, so I apologize on this one. My other ones are bigger, but.
And while I have the mic, I just want to tip off Chuck Wells is next to speak to us. So.
Okay, so the first is what we're calling the gateway to North Scottsdale. The north portion of Mack's land along Pima Road serves as the gateway to hundreds of North Scottsdale neighborhoods, and a slight variation to just one building, Building A, could honor this gateway. Building A could become slightly smaller, and then that would allow, on both sides here, Mack has told us they're planning smaller office buildings on both sides of this in a future proposal. So to add one kind of in the center here, a similar thing would make this much more appealing as you came off the freeway and into Pima Road, and would be much more compatible with the neighborhoods around it. The second thing that we're looking at, let me get this off, Mack's buildings will dwarf everything around them, and that's not good design. Good design should integrate in with its neighbors. And when you drive up the freeway today, you notice that large Store America that, again, you saw on other signs. And when the Mack buildings go in, it's going to look like a tiny, tiny little building. So on the south part of their land, the warehouses are much smaller. So it seems that on the north part of the land, the warehouses could still be successful if they were smaller and maybe cut in 2. And I don't know, can you help me with that up there? This shows you the different buildings that are near it. So the ones to the north, which you heard mentioned, are the AJ's Shopping Center and the Camden apartment buildings, and these are the size that they are. And then to the west, or excuse me, to the east, you'll see we have the Santi Rehabilitation Center, Store America and Victorium, and those are the size of their buildings. And when you compare them to the 768 feet that Mack is going to have, they're going to be minuscule looking compared to the Mack buildings. And then the last but not least item that we're looking at are that design features need to be added to the backs of the buildings. The backs of these buildings, which are up to more than 3 football fields long, and per Mac's last discussion with us, they're flat. They also have all of the docking bays for the semi-trucks, so some of them I think have over 40 garage doors along the back. And so, as you can imagine, that's very ugly. We recommended to MAC that they look at using a sawtooth docking bay, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute, but they do have these docking bays at Mayo Hospital, and MAC's attorney, Jason Morrison, said that he would go look at them and get back to us, but we did not hear back. And many of the architectural details that we want on the back of the building have not been addressed. So we're hoping that you will do that today. And let me just show you. These are sawtooth docking bays, so they go in at an angle and then come back at an angle. So the truck pulls in kind of at an angle, which actually you need less room for the trucks than you do if they're straight garage doors. But this would add a very nice architectural design to the backs of the buildings, or it could be done with other elements such as block, metal, and stone. So DC Ranch, we understand that MAC has the zoning to do warehouses on this property, but they're being built in Scottsdale where we uphold the highest standards of design, and so we're hoping that you today will make that happen. And then we did want to go on record just saying that we do have a lot of concerns about traffic. While we know they've made some changes, their traffic study shows that their warehouses could generate up to 350 semi-truck trips per day. So that's a lot of trucks on the 101, that's a lot of trucks coming off at Pima and Bell Road, and we know that these areas are already very, very congested, very dangerous with that X crossing on the freeway ramp, and we are concerned that these changes will not be enough to keep people safe. The other thing that we would like to see make a statement about is that we feel there should be some operational mandates for this property, such as no outdoor storage allowed, 24/7 security, and that they would address truck noise. So I know all those don't fall in your purview, but we wanted to say that we'd like to see that happen, and hopefully the city of Scottsdale will make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And yeah, I'm going to improve on my clock disciplinarianship. So I will now, Chuck Wells.
I appreciate it. My name's Chuck Wells. I've been a resident of Pima Acres for about 28 years now. My wife and I built our house up there a long time ago, and I've driven by this site at least twice a day for the past 28 years, probably 20,000 drive-bys at a minimum, looking at this site. I'm in favor of the development. I'm tired of driving by this site and seeing the illegal dumping of landscaping and construction materials here. It's time to go to the next level here. Like many of us in the area, my initial concern was, like everybody else here, is traffic. And then my next thought was, what else could we put there that would have less traffic than this type of concept? It's many square feet. We have 100 acres to figure out here. If this was an apartment complex, mid-rise office, whatever, the traffic jams of the flood of traffic getting out in the morning, getting back in the day would just really clog up the streets here. I feel that this type of project will flow continuously through the day. Sorry. You mentioned 350 trucks a day going in and out of there. There's 150,000 cars on the 101 right now on a daily basis. 350 cars not going to be hardly even notified or noticed. I've had a chance to review the design elements. My business I travel all over the city, from the Southwest Valley to the Southeast Valley, seeing these projects come out of the ground. I've never seen anything this beautiful. Design elements, the materials being used, the landscaping, the generous setbacks of 100 feet. We don't see that in other parts of the valley. We're lucky to have a company like MAC, in my opinion, taking the lead on this. They've set the bar high on this, and honestly, it's the best use we can probably put on the site without getting overrun by traffic. I mean, if we had anything there that was more of a traffic generator than this, it'd be like picking up kids at daycare. There's a flood of traffic in the morning and flood at night. Because it's strung out through the day, I think we'll be fine. The additional lane is a win-win for all of us. The setbacks are incredible. The elevations are beautiful. The building materials are beautiful. And again, it's just time for the site to be developed. This is the lowest impact use I can possibly see going there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wells, for your comment. I will call Mr. Robert Ullman, and I should remind speakers today to please tell us your name and to tell us your address for public record. Next speaker will be Mr. Robert Ullman, if he is in the building, and following that will be John Colby, Glenn Stith. So we've got runner-up and somebody's on deck. So you don't have to get up if I called your name. Just so you know you're ready. So just Mr. Ullman at this time.
We are sort of a team. My name is Ronald Meyerson, 9149 East Nittany Drive in Scottsdale. We submitted written comments, and for the sake of saving some time, I just want to make sure that the comments that we did submit are going to be reviewed by this board, and that we're going to be getting some answers to some of the questions that we posed. Is that the way this process unfolds?
What was your last name again? I'm going to search for your public comments.
I thought Robert was going to put together both of our names. Apparently he did not.
Ronald Meyerson and
Yes.
Robert Ullman. Yeah, your comments were received and included in the packet for public record and review.
Okay, so that they will, the comments that we made, the questions that were posed, we will get answers to. And again, our major problem has to do with traffic, and I think that's already been addressed.
Okay.
I suspect it'll continue to be addressed.
Well, you have an additional minute if you'd like to air any,
Well,
air any
one
concerns
of
or
our
questions.
biggest concerns is the traffic that's going to be exiting the site onto the frontage road as it heads north toward Pima. You've got all the traffic coming off the 101, and that traffic has to merge. There right now is a very small sign that tells the frontage road traffic to merge.
To yield.
If there hasn't been an accident there yet, there will be. And with the added traffic coming off that property, there needs to be something done. Perhaps a flashing yield sign, a stop sign, something that is going to be able to control the traffic, because right now it is, to say the least, a very, very dangerous situation.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman and Mr. Meyerson, for talking to us today.
The other thing I wanted to add is when the survey was done, I don't know if it included the snowbirds, plus the employees that are going to be in these large warehouses. And I think it's mainly where you have driveway number 2 is where the concerns are. And all the conversation I've heard is to get to the site. We're not talking about getting back on the freeway or the possibility that somebody's going to have to cross over Pima.
Very good.
Provider there.
Very
Thank you
good.
very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. As stated, John Colby is up next. Glenn Stith is on deck, and Ethan Nolden is in the hole. Very good. Mr. Colby, thank you for talking to us. Please.
Thank you. My concerns are essentially the same as the two gentlemen that were here. Every hearing I've been to has showed that, I'm sure that the Mac company is going to do a great job on the site design and everything will be done correctly. But all the talk's never been about when the tractor trailer units are leaving the site, if they're going to go up Pima. It's an uphill grade for miles. And the traffic, especially at high times, is strong just with the passenger cars. So I'm wondering what could be done to make their route to get back onto a major highway easier, and what could be done to not cause a jam during peak hours, rush hour, when many people are returning to Cave Creek or DC Ranch.
Thank you, Mr.
The form follows function. I mean, that's a famous architectural principle, but we haven't heard much about the function of the warehouses. And if they're assembling tractor-trailer units to do different types of packaging, and they're going out more than one truck per bay per day, it's going to put a big burden on the northbound Pima traffic. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Colby. Next, Glenn Stith, followed by Ethan Nolden and Roberta Henriksen thereafter. For the record, just as a reminder, state your name and address. Thank you.
Yes, her name is Stith,
Sorry.
everybody gets it wrong. No problem. I want to just echo what others have said. I want to thank Kim for representing the residents of DC Ranch. I live in DC Ranch. I've been a resident there for 12 years. I'm on the board of the Columbia Townhome Community. Attend church at Highlands Church. I go to the Villages Health Club. Frequent a lot of the restaurants and establishments, and the reason I say that is that this is frequently a topic of conversation, and I've heard feedback from dozens upon dozens of people. And I haven't found one person until today that was a resident in the area that thinks this is a good idea. So it's good to know that there's a resident in the neighborhood that do think this is a good idea. The big concern, overwhelmingly, that I hear are we think 350 semi-trailer trucks is a big deal, depending on which direction they are going and what time of the day they are going in that direction. And that if a significant amount of semi-trailer trucks pulling heavy loads uphill north on Pima Road is a part of this, then this is unconscionable. Unless something could be done to create special routes that would prohibit trucks of a certain size, a certain horsepower, certain loads at certain times of the day to have access to that corridor. This is a big deal, and it is talked about a lot. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, Mr. Stith. That was it. And next, Ethan Nolden. I hope I got that right.
You did, thank you.
Okay, and then if I just, to give notice for those speaking after you, Roberta Hendrickson and Sherry Scharnbacher. Is that close enough? Close enough. You know who I'm talking about. Mr. Nolden, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and members of the board. My name is Ethan Nolden. I am one of the 7,000 residents of DC Ranch, 20437 North 96th Way. I wish to build upon the comments of Chris Iris, our Community Director of Public Affairs. There are only 3 main points of entry to North Scottsdale off the 101: Scottsdale Road, Hayden Road, and Pima Road. 5 of the 6 northeast or northwest corners of these intersections are within Scottsdale. The 6th, the northwest corner of Scottsdale Road in Phoenix, is reported to be under consideration for the Arizona Coyotes Arena development. Of Scottsdale's 5 northern corners, development at 2 is already underway. The One Scottsdale development and the Cavasson development at Scottsdale Road and Hayden Road, respectively. Together with the already approved high-density developments on Scottsdale Road and Hayden Road south of the 101, all of this growth will place an enormous burden on the 101 thoroughfare and adjacent roadways. None of this growth was accounted for in the traffic study provided by MAC for its development, which study further was flawed by its failure to properly account for seasonal traffic patterns which are unique to Scottsdale, and the already established large-scale events held at TPC and Westworld. I raise these concerns to you knowing traffic mitigation is not directly within your purview. But Scottsdale's I-1 zoning does permit a variety of uses, well beyond the warehousing proposed by MAC. Further, Section 5.1801 of the Scottsdale Code requires I-1 developments to make, quote, appropriate transition in areas adjacent to residential districts. This board must consider whether MAC has proposed, especially on the northern portions of this parcel, reflect such appropriate transition. The design this board approves here will be one of 3 remaining corners at these points of entry to northern Scottsdale, over which Scottsdale has design review. I urge you to use your authority to enforce the city's requirement of, quote, appropriate transitions by demanding reductions in scale and massing of the proposed structures on the northern portions of this parcel, thus indirectly encouraging uses more compatible with the adjacent areas than warehousing and more likely to represent a meaningful gateway to northern Scottsdale, as suggested by Ms. Irish. A reduction in scale and repurposing could have the additional benefit of reducing the volume of semi-truck traffic the MAC development will place on the adjacent roadway system. Any material volume of semi-truck traffic from the MAC development is incompatible with the substantial additional volume of passenger car traffic that will be generated by the already approved Scottsdale developments and the rumored Phoenix one.
Mr. Nolden, if you could wrap your comments up.
One last sentence. At the very least, design improvements required by this board of the MAC development will provide more pleasant views for drivers and passengers as traffic comes to a standstill along these adjacent roadways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nolden. As previously mentioned, Roberta Henriksen. After that will be Sherry. And after that would be Jeanette O'Rodden. Is that an N or an R at the end? One of the two. Okay. Oh, it's an A. No, it's neither. Okay. Ms. Henriksen, thank you for speaking with us today.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Roberta Henriksen. I live at 18963 North 101st Street, and I have been a resident of DC Ranch for 22 years. There are 2 comments I'd like to make in regard to today's agenda topic. And the first is I strongly support the changes which are outlined by Chris Irish for us at DC Ranch. She very articulately addressed those issues which meet our concerns. The second comment I make is not as relevant today, but is so much more important, and that is the traffic. I had contacted the City Council a couple of weeks ago in regard to the dangerous intersection of when you exit the 101 via Pima and the frontage road, and that frontage road coming together. It's a very dangerous intersection. I think that I would hope that you look again at that traffic plan and try to adjust it for 350 large, heavy, loud semis coming through that intersection. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for speaking to us. Next, we have Ms. Scherenbacher, who will, I assume you'll correct me. Ms. Urata, after that, followed by Chris Mullen. Just for the record, or as a reminder, please state your name and address for the record.
Sheree Sharabaika, 18650 North Thompson Peak Parkway. I feel like we're already friends. I am here to be in favor of the MAC project, and I do live in DC Ranch. I am also a former council member in the state of Michigan and worked on the Michigan Taxation and Finance Committee and was in charge of a major riverfront project that was done in our city. I have since retired from being from my business, which was warehousing and distribution, and I had that in several states. I have lived here since 1994, and I have seen the place where this is going to go in and known all this time it's going to be industrial. I feel like with the experience I've had and with what I have seen, and I've attended meetings, that MAC has bent over backwards trying to work with people to make this aesthetically pleasing, as well as solving other problems that could become issues with drainage, traffic. They brought in ADOT. They offered alternate plans, but no one was interested. After a while, a company does get a little worn down, and why do they want to work with you anymore? But they continue, and they are developing something that I think is quite beautiful. And as a city, you know that for a city to grow, which the city has tremendously and in a beautiful manner, it has to have places like industrial parks along the way for all these businesses coming in to have storage and other means. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shirabaka. And next would be Jeanette Urata, followed by Chris Mullen, and after that, Patrick Crosby.
Hello.
Please.
My name is Jeanette Orada, and I live at 9407 East Ironwood Bend. I'm a DC Ranch resident, and I think I have 3 points today. So my first point is Chris Irish has, I think, done a wonderful job interacting with the 7,000 residents of DC Ranch and working with MAC and providing modifications that we think are necessary for this to go forward. So I fully support what she articulated already. Secondly, I have to say that I was really surprised sitting through the proceedings, because if you look at, I think there's over 200 pages of comments that were in, I'm sure you have a huge stack, hopefully you're not looking at it in paper, but almost all of those were related specifically to 350 semi-trucks. And it wasn't until Chris got up here that that number or that issue was identified. So as a resident where clearly every single meeting that we had, that was the predominant issue, I was just really surprised that it didn't come up until a comment. And then my third point, I guess, is we're really here talking out of frustration, and I don't really think you're the right people that we need to be talking to. As we attended all of these public meetings, the zoning issue, everybody just waved their hands and said, the zoning was set in 1986, and I think that's really the question we need to understand as a community is, nobody ever go back and look at that again? 1986 was a long time ago. All of those residential houses weren't in place at the time, and I think a lot of our frustration is we're talking now about warehouses and 350 semi-trucks. And just earlier, we talked about every single thing that you approve as the precedence for the next one. When you look across Pima Road to the west, all of that's undeveloped. And I just ask you, are we going to be back here in a year talking about another 350 semi-trucks and warehouses? I really hope not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Urata. Next, Chris Mullen, followed by Patrick Crosby, and then Chad Mandelbaum.
Thank you. Councilman, as I was compiling my comments, I did compile them expecting to have 3 minutes, so I would appreciate it if I may have an extra minute for the full.
Please. Thank
you. Chris Mullen, 9313 East Canyon View Road in Scottsdale. I am a resident of DC Ranch. I have 3 concerns about the proposal today. The first is around parking. And as far as that is concerned, I find the applicant's proposal disingenuous. The applicant is claiming that these 4 buildings will be used as warehouses, yet during the open house in August, the applicant, through applicant's attorney, Mr. Morris, stated that they did not expect these buildings to be used as warehouse or cross-dock because the expected amount that they would charge to lease these buildings per square foot exceeded what would be economically viable for a tenant looking to use this as a warehouse. Warehousing provides the most favorable parking ratio in the city code at 1 spot for every 800 square feet. So if they have a tenant that does not intend to use it for warehousing, if you look at the site plan, there is no space to add additional parking according to their plans. So I would encourage the board to ask some serious questions today about what they intend to lease these buildings for, and if they do end up leasing it for a use other than warehousing, where they intend to fit the additional parking that would be required. The second is around the mass of these buildings, and I do want to quote from the application, page 26, the staff finding that the proposed development conforms to the general plan and character area plan for light industrial office. I want to challenge that finding. This property lies on the eastern edge of the air park and is adjacent to 2 city parks and within 1,000 feet of a residential zone. Therefore, if I look at the Scottsdale general plan, I want to call your attention to character and design element 1.4, that this should encourage transitions and blending of character between character types, including building height, mass, and orientation, and also land use 6.3 to encourage commercial land usage of similar scale and character. The buildings that are proposed are massive and are dwarfing all the other buildings that are adjacent to it. Just to put some sizing around what Ms. Irish commented on earlier, the closest building to this is that self-storage at 1.6 million cubic feet of mass. To the south, one of the larger buildings, the potato barn, at 1.5 million cubic feet of mass, and yet the applicant's smallest warehouse, number A, is 4.5 million cubic feet of mass. So I do not feel that the proposal is a logical transition between the air park and the adjacent zone. And my last concern relates to variety. The applicant is proposing to build 4 warehouses, and if you looked at Mr. Butler's pictures, they look almost exactly the same. One of the principles of the air park character plan was to encourage greater visual variety, this is land use 4.7, between employment land uses in residential neighborhoods and avoid continuous building shapes and mass adjacent to residential neighborhoods. I think that the current proposal, they could do better on the plan for each of the buildings. So I'll just finish the sentence. I would encourage the board to encourage the applicant to go back and propose a better architectural variety across these 4 warehouses.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Next, we have Patrick Crosby, followed by Chad Mandelbaum, and then Jack Bauer or Bayer. Sir, is it Jack Bayer? Mr. Crosby, please.
Thank you for letting me speak for a minute or so. First thing I want to mention is that my name is Pat Crosby, and I live at 18680 North 91st Street in Ironwood Village. Everything is talking DC Ranch, and we don't want to be forgotten up on the north end of this development. I want to thank Chris Irish for including us in everything that has been going on, and she's been doing a wonderful job. And thank you, Chris, for bringing us into this picture. A lot of talk about traffic. I just wanted to give you a clear idea of the issue that I think is, and that's Pima Road access, which is, I believe, the main exit from this whole development is up Pima Road access. Now, right now, that access has a yield sign which nobody pays any attention to. And at the bottom of that, trying to turn to Pima Road, it has a green light that's always green, and not everybody pays attention to that. They all back up on coming off of 101. Now, if I'm a truck coming up the access road to get onto 101, I've got to make a left lane move from Pima access road. You have the people coming off at 101 who wants to turn on Pima to the right, and they're now moving to the right, and you got the trucks moving to the left, and I see nothing but problems there. So that should be looked at. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Next, Mr. Mandelbaum.
My prepared remarks are less than 3 minutes, but more than 2.
Okay. 2.5. Split the difference.
They're closer to 3. How does this? Okay, perfect.
And just allow me to say, next would be Jack Bayer, followed by Paul Getty.
Chad Mandelbaum, 18,000 North 100th Way in Scottsdale at Wingate Ranch. As a licensed real estate broker, I've represented clients in over 1 million square feet of industrial leases. The biggest problem with this project is that the significant building height and dock height door count will first and foremost attract distribution users. The distribution tenants will create huge semi-truck volume, creating traffic jams at 3 already busy intersections. The 561-page traffic impact report commissioned by MAC has several glaring deficiencies. First, it only deals with the northern portion of the project. By completely ignoring the south half, it contemplates the impact of only half the total traffic that this project will generate. Second, page 6 of the report states that the north and southbound intersections at the 101 and Bell will not operate at a satisfactory level of service both morning and evening peak hours. Third, the report ignores the impact this project will have on crossover traffic merging right from the northbound Pima exit ramp to Pima Road and semi-truck traffic exiting the project and merging left to the northbound or southbound 101. This occurs in a short 600-foot stretch of the access road. It's highlighted in that little circle on this picture. Fourth, the report ignores the impact this semi-trailer traffic will have on the northbound 101 access road, starting as far back as Frank Lloyd Wright. Most semis will avoid the crossover merge here and will instead exit at Frank Lloyd Wright, requiring them to pass through both the Frank Lloyd Wright and Bell Road intersections before entering this project. As you know, the Frank Lloyd Wright 101 intersection is the busiest of all of Scottsdale. Finally, the report is not accounting for the volume of semi-truck traffic based on the actual dock door count of this project, but instead uses an industry formula based on general warehouse characteristics. That's outlined on page 22 of the report. The extra northbound access road and subsequent Pima right-hand turn lane that MAC identified won't fix any of these deficiencies. The only solution is what Phil Kircher, who's Scottsdale's traffic engineering manager, describes as a braided northbound Pima exit ramp that includes a bridge over the access road. He reports the cost of this solution at $27 million. It's not contemplated in ADOT's planned 101 improvements. The exit ramp bridge won't even be possible if building A is constructed because you need that land in order to build it. So once that building's there, you can never fix the problem that's going to be caused by this project. It's noteworthy that Scottsdale's planning department identifies one of the deficiencies in the traffic report, noting on the cover page in red ink, and I quote, "To show the full impacts of a project, other project phases can't be shown as background traffic." The city's relying significantly on a flawed traffic study. I'm asking this committee to send the project back to planning and require that the traffic impact report be revised to account for both phases of the project at the same time, the true level of semi-trailer traffic generated by the total project's 170 dock-high doors, and the impacts to both the merge area on the northbound 101 access road and the Frank Lloyd Wright intersection. I leave you with one final comment. Scottsdale bills itself as most livable city. MAC's impact to the traffic flow at the gateway to North Scottsdale completely contradicts this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandelbaum. Next, we've got Jack Bayer, and then I've got Paul Getty, followed by David Gramza. Welcome, Mr. Bayer. If you state your name and address.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members, for this opportunity. My name is Jack Bayer. I live at 9393 East Palo Brea Bend. Of all the folks in this room, I live closest to this project, so it impacts me more than does anyone else in this room. I think the biggest concern I have is the zoning issue. A decision made 37 years ago needs to be revisited because there's no guidelines what's going to be stored in those warehouses. chemicals, flammable materials, propane tanks. Nothing scares me more than being woke up in the middle of the night to find out I have to be evacuated because there's a fire and something's caught fire at this warehouse. Whether it's pool chemicals, lithium batteries, propane tanks, it could be very dangerous, and I live very close to that project. And in addition, again, the traffic. The interchange is not designed to handle 350 trucks a day. In addition, you have events at Westworld that go on 9 months of the year that bring additional traffic. You have 3 schools within 1 mile of this project. So you have school buses and additional traffic there. In addition, again, in a few weeks you'll have the Phoenix Open. Again, you'll have all that traffic in this neighborhood, plus 250 trucks a day. It's just really not compatible with the plans from North Scottsdale. Again, the interchange is not meant to handle that kind of traffic. That cross merge is dangerous. Adding semi-trucks just makes it even worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. Next, we have Mr. Getty. Mr. Getty, followed by David Gramza. Mr. Getty.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that overhead. My name is Paul M. Getty, PE. I'm a registered civil engineer in the state of Arizona. And I hope you can all hear me.
Mr. Getty, I'm sorry to prohibit you, but you have to be on the microphone for those listening for the public record.
You can use the mouse to point here. Okay. You can on the screen. You can just move it around.
Okay. Well.
See it on the screen here.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
You can just move it. It'll come up.
Do we have a larger that shows Frank Lloyd Wright as well? Okay, I'll take the first one, please. This is good. Okay, as we know, northbound 101 exits to Pima Road right at the location where the Mack industrial site is proposed. And as it is right now, the northbound exiting vehicles must merge with this oncoming ramp from Frank Lloyd Wright. So the traffic stacks up already in this right-hand lane trying to exit to Pima Road. Adding to that is the traffic from Bell Road not yielding to the northbound traffic trying to exit to Pima Road. You have cross-merging traffic in that area already and a very, very short distance to accomplish that. Adding a second right turn lane will only make matters worse and will make it more dangerous with more accidents in the area and more congestion. I urge the board to send the project back to planning and back to ADOT. From my perspective, the only solution is to make a flyover exit ramp to northbound Pima Road. If you want Pima Road to be a gateway to North Scottsdale, then please consider that as the alternative. Because right now you have a disaster in the waiting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Getty, and I'll invite final speaker, David Gramza, to the podium. If you could state your name and address.
Hello, David Gramza, 20559 North 94th Place. I'm a DC Ranch resident. I've lived there 25 years. I'm a CPA. Go figure. I know a company needs to make ROI on an investment like this. But I had two concerns coming here. We've got turnover on this board. Hopefully you're all up to speed on this. But this is a big issue. And to echo other people's comments, there are 3 gateways to North Scottsdale. Look how well that Dial building did at Scottsdale Road. It's had a lease sign on it for 7 years. Strike one. The Cavison off Hayden, still yet to be seen what's going on there, but I'm not so sure those nationwide buildings are operating the way they should be at occupancy. I've enjoyed some beers at Pitch, but I think there's work to be done there. Now we want to put trucks on the other gateway to North Scottsdale. And I'm a CPA, and you do have to another person's point here, look at the whole project and actually take a pencil and count all of the truck bays. Do it. It's a lot. It's not going to work. Chris has done a good job. We want maybe a smoother way in. Count all the truck bays. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Gramza. And I've got 4 written comments here. That means members of the public that wrote public comments. I see, Mr. Gramza, you also did a written comment. Elizabeth Keperitis said, we hope the DRB considers the input from DC Ranch. Bud Kern says, disaster for nearby communities and farther north communities due to the traffic debacle it would create. You must do the right thing to protect Scottsdale from this company from exploiting a zoning mistake. Roberta Henriksen, who I think spoke to us, we support DC Ranch's requested changes to the site plan. One more comment from John Colby, who I think spoke to us. Impact of northbound traffic on Pima Road is paramount. There has been little done to reduce the impact of 54-foot-long trailer boxes going uphill on Pima for over 2 miles of uphill grade. We need real estimates of how many trucks in and out on a 24-hour basis. Residents will be mired in traffic slowdowns caused by tractor trailer units on Pima Road. Acoustic walls, also mentioned acoustic walls. So I think this concludes the section. I'll ask Carissa, any more requests to speak or public comment? Okay, I think this concludes the public comment section. And Brad, can I allow the applicant, what's normal and customary for this, to respond to that, or should we just open it up to council members or to board members' questions? What's normal and customary?
Councilmember Graham, typically the applicant would be given a chance to respond to the comments.
Okay.
That's up to you as far as the time on that, usually 5 minutes or so.
Okay, what if I offered Jason Morris and his team 6 minutes? Would that be satisfactory? That was 6 minutes total, not each of your team.
Thank you for clarifying. Mr. Chair, I'm delighted that we were able to hear some additional feedback. And I think based upon what we've heard, based upon what the DRB has heard, I think we have a sense of where this is coming from. This is largely a traffic conversation, but it's also a conversation that sneaks back into the zoning of the site and what's appropriate. So I know you've been advised by your council, and I know you have a sense of what your areas of expertise are and what the direction of the DRB would be. In lieu of going through a zoning case or a planning commission case, this is a much more narrow avenue of discussion. So with that being said, as we look at this site, this is, and I'm going to reiterate, one of the last, if not the single last opportunity to create buildings of this character that serve the city of Scottsdale. And there is a reason that zoning has been there over 35 years. And I should also point out that many of the plans and areas and overlays that were discussed this evening, and we heard quotes from those plans, were actually adopted far subsequent to the underlying zoning. What the obligation of the applicant is to plan something that's appropriate for the 124 acres or the 65 acres that you're seeing today. This site can accommodate a type of building that isn't available anywhere else in Scottsdale, or is available in very limited quantities. And from a zoning standpoint, we have the ability to do that, and it is a service to the city of Scottsdale. And it's certainly why the State Land Department auctioned the land to the bidders at this price for this use. Now, no case is perfect, and we're happy to address why the city of Scottsdale and ADOT have both approved the traffic reports accompanying this application, because I think there's some more detail that you may want to hear in your questions. But beyond that, as we talk about what's appropriate, it's not appropriate to redesign a site, not appropriate to completely disregard the building and character that this area can accommodate, as long as we're not asking for variances or changes to either the underlying zoning or the development standards. Where it is appropriate, and where I think this conversation could effectively go to address some of the comments we've heard, is what can we do from a design standpoint, what can we do from a landscape standpoint, and what can we do from an operational standpoint to address the concerns that were heard? Because all of the items that we heard in opposition fall within that area and the confines of that area. So with that, and with 2 minutes and 43 seconds remaining, I will end my comments knowing that the DRB likely has questions of the individual experts who are part of this development team.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. You have another 2 minutes to spend, so you're donating that back to us?
I've actually got a small song that...
I'm expecting an hour of questions from my colleagues today, so you can keep your meter running.
Thank you.
And we've got the full team and we've got staff. We've got Mr. Anderson and Brad Carr available for questions. Wayland and Chris are available for questions. So with that, I do want to thank members of the public who are watching us streaming and on Channel 12 today. And this is quite a meeting for me to start my rotation, right? Is this how every meeting is? Is this how you guys do every meeting? So with that, I will please invite my colleagues to begin their questions. And I don't know if we want to start with the most senior to my extreme left, Member Craig or Vice Chair Brand.
I was going to make a suggestion to yourself as far as how we tackle this, because there's a lot to digest here. We may want to, a lot of the comments that I prepared preliminary to this are a little bit more from a design and exposure and building layout perspective, which I think can probably push to a later time. But maybe we want to tackle just the traffic comments first, and instead of kind of going through all things so don't get lost, maybe we just tackle that one first. Does that sound...
So I've seen that attempted where you do it topically, and it falls apart usually because people, we can try it. We can be creative here, experimental.
I'd like to start with traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, traffic is a concern that I have. So why don't we experiment here and try topically to discuss traffic? I think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna work, yeah. But let's attempt that. And
yeah, start with me. I live there.
Okay, so Member Joyner is requesting to begin the questioning, and we'll do the topical. Member Mason, did you have a quick comment?
360 trucks per day, assuming it's an average workday of 18 hours that they're in.
Okay. Yeah, can I?
Part of mine.
Yeah. Can I go to Member Joyner and then come back to you? Is that okay?
I just want to say it's one truck every 3 minutes, which is not much.
Which is not much.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
I guess it's how you measure it, right? Yeah. Member Joyner, please.
Thank you. I did have a Zoom call with the applicant, and I want to start off with the positive things because I think they have done an amazing job with the design and the setbacks and everything else that they've tried to make this palatable. However, I did not get my hands on the traffic report until late yesterday. I have been asking for it for 5 days. I got it late yesterday. I only had time to read the first 10 pages. It said this project is going to generate 2,644 trips per day. That's 230 cars or trucks per hour during a 24-hour period. It did say that that report was generated using software. So I want to comment that last Thursday at 4:30, I was making my way home from another meeting that I was at, and I had the pleasure of sitting through 8 lights, getting off the freeway and trying to access Pima. I live in North Scottsdale. So I had a lot of time to look at the project, and of course I drive this 8 times a day to the different places that I go. And I was trying to visualize it, and I don't remember which one of the speakers talked about it, but they said that semis coming out of that access onto the road, if they want to get on the freeway, are going to have to come across the access that comes from Bell, through that merging lane that no one abides by the yield sign, move over a 2 semi truck, and try to get onto the freeway. And I was sitting there just thinking, how would I feel now? Because by now, traffic is backed up all the way onto the freeway. This is at 4:30. And I'm going, I like the project. I don't want to say that I don't like the project, and I do honor property rights. But this property was zoned in 1986. None of us lived up there then. The freeway wasn't even there then. So to say that, yes, you have zoning, I get that. But somebody brought up, this needs to go back to zoning and be looked at again. And the attorneys have told us, traffic is outside of our purview. Well, I ask you, whose purview is it?
Not entirely.
Okay, whose purview is it if it isn't the neighbors that have to go in and out every day, try to get home from work, try to get home from the grocery store? And one other comment on Bell Road. My husband and I park our RV at Bell Road and the Ice Den, which is right in this area off of Bell Road. The traffic has already been mitigated for the soccer fields. So I do see problems with that, using that as ingress and egress for semi-trucks. I'm not so upset about that as I am the Pima Road exit. I did ask when these extra lanes were going to be built. Again, I was told that was outside my purview and I couldn't ask the question, but I want it on the record that we need to know, when is ADOT going to complete these roads to improve all of our lives north of Scottsdale before this goes? So I asked a question. I said, could we hold an occupancy permit until the roads were done? I was told I couldn't ask that. Let the record show I did ask that. But anyway, I like the project. I hate the traffic, and I do not. I have been racking my brain for the last month over what a solution was for semi-trucks on this road. I don't have one. I don't know how it's going to work. And I don't care if it's 1 semi-truck per hour. It depends on when those hours are. Now, if they restrict the traffic to after 9 o'clock at night, before 5 o'clock in the morning, that might work. But I am extremely concerned for all of us that live in North Scottsdale. Selfishly, I mean, the gentleman or whoever said we have 3 ways to get off the freeway to get home, and all of them are a mess. So that's my comment about traffic.
Questions or just comments?
Those are my comments.
Very good. Vice Chair Brand.
I do have a question, because it is, this is a very sticky issue as we've been versed on this. I was curious, because it seems like this development, whether or not there is going to be concern about volume from zero development to something that's being developed here. There's no question. I mean, there's going to be an increase in volume. Either it's going to be a drastic increase in standard vehicles, or a combination of standard vehicles and truck bays. I would like to hear from, as all these cases are considered and staff reviews the reports and looks about compliance and grading intersections, and I'd like to hear from our staff of experts, from the planning staff, from traffic, what the analysis look like from a city standpoint, because I've personally, just for shared information, I've been a part of cases and developments in site planning that has an existing completely dysfunctional intersection on a property, and it's like it handicaps you, and you're just inheriting a problem that is already existing, and it can be very, very frustrating to work with something, and this seems like one of those cases, and I think just from a city staff standpoint, if we could get some, a little bit of feedback from that. Is that possible, or is that appropriate?
Councilmember Graham, Vice Chair Brand, we have to be a little careful again because of the purview of the DRB. I think we need to understand exactly what questions you have. If it's related to the amount of traffic generated there, again, it's kind of determined by the zoning, and that's what it is. If you're talking about the access points and where those land with some of our public frontages or public road frontages, I think our transportation staff can speak to that. But again, we don't have the ability to necessarily comment on the amount of traffic generated by this. It's a land use that's permitted there, and zoning's in place. So
Brad,
we can have one of our staff members here. We have them present from transportation to speak to those questions. I just think we need to be cautious and careful that we limit our conversation.
Let us exercise caution. I know that traffic engineering manager Phil Kircher is here, and he's got a microphone. He might be dangerous with it. If he could just tell us a little bit without pushing, maybe go to the edge of where we can go, but tell us as for an edification, what you can say about this project.
Thank you, Councilman Graham and members of the board. Yes, Phil Kircher with the Transportation Department. It would help if there were more specific questions, but Mr. Wright did a good job of kind of the overview of access points and the improvements. And as he mentioned, when they first came in, we started working with ADOT staff on expectations of what kind of improvements should be made to the frontage road. And MAC has done basically exactly what ADOT requested, and we were part of that discussion and analysis. So as Mr. Wright mentioned, they will be adding essentially a second lane onto the frontage road approaching Pima. So where today there is one right turn lane, there will be two in the future, and then that lane will extend up to their driveway. So there will be adding an additional lane on Pima Road. One thing that wasn't mentioned is that, as you alluded to, there's a ADOT freeway widening project that's going to be starting very soon, first of the year. So it will be adding another lane onto the 101 freeway through this area. And included with that project, kind of a last-minute addition, they have added a second off-ramp. So as you're going northbound on the 101, there will be two lanes to exit to get to Pima Road. So, we can't always predict what's going to happen, but I think the addition of the two lanes exiting and the two lanes onto Pima should help the issues in this area. The weave issue that's been discussed, I don't think that's going to help the weave, the merge. And we mentioned that to ADOT and basically just said, we need to pay attention to see how well that works after things are constructed, and they agreed. That situation is not unique to this interchange. They have, other interchanges throughout the valley that have similar designs. ADOT's aware of the issues. There was discussion about putting in flashing signs or stop signs. ADOT's, actually had a committee that put together and looked at it, and they don't have a good solution for that. It essentially is the way it got designed that, they merge, and it's not clear who should give the right of way. So I don't think that we can fix that with this project. It's been discussed that, yes, a lot of this is tied to the zoning on the site, the amount of trucks. We don't know. We don't know who they're going to be leasing the buildings to. We don't know how much truck traffic that means. We don't know if it's a distribution center or a warehouse. All we have is a site plan that says it's a warehouse. So I couldn't tell you how much truck traffic there will be exactly, as was mentioned. The study assumed, I think, 30%, Chuck, just based on the land use.
On the warehousing part, it was the observed rate for that warehouse land use that's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So it's a projection based upon historic information.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that we don't know. We looked at the study, we review it. Again, ADOT accepted it. We looked at all the access points. We worked with them. They're going to do wider driveways to help with, getting the trucks in and out more quickly. And again, as Chuck mentioned, 91st Street will be connected, which, should help relieve some of the traffic issues in this area. So,
Phil, did you mention sequence of construction as far as, did you mention that?
With the 101?
Right, the additional lane?
It's beginning in January. They're going to start.
Oh, I'm sorry, the frontage road.
That will be done with the development of the site, so.
Simultaneous.
It's probably going to be lagging the ADOT construction, but they will be required to do it with their first phase. Okay. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil, for that commentary. I don't know how much we can probe the traffic without leaving our purview, but I will invite, since we're on the topic of transportation, it seems like we're staying pretty disciplined to that. So, Member Craig.
Right, I'd like to talk about the white color. I'm kidding. Sorry, Jeff. I'd like to look at the site plan and the overall plan that you guys identified, the ingress and egress, and how that relates to the traffic. And I see here everything going into the project, but nothing coming out. And the exit from the parking to the northbound Pima frontage, will that have an acceleration lane, or is that going to be just moving right on to the frontage road? And I guess that's a question for either the city staff or the traffic.
So the current concept is shown here on the right of the exhibit. It's a right-in, right-out driveway that connects directly to the frontage road. Currently, the frontage road transitions from 2 lanes down at Bell Road to a single lane as you approach the ramp. ADOT's consensus was to maintain that 2-lane cross-section the entire way. So the vehicles that are exiting from this driveway to proceed north would wait for a gap in the northbound traffic before they're able to join the northbound volumes. And otherwise, they would be transitioning from, if you had an acceleration lane, a 3-lane section back to 2-lane section before you got to the ramp. And I think the consensus was that utilizing gaps in the existing traffic on coming from northbound from Bell Road would be a better configuration.
Sure. Okay, so question, is that primarily for truck traffic, or where will other truck traffic exits be located? Because I'm assuming, and I like the project, it's a good use for this location being immediately adjacent to the 101. But I would agree with people that I think that an exit onto Pima Road, I don't know where trucks are going to go.
So the graphic isn't intended to show all the movements that are possible necessarily. So certainly at 91st Street southbound, you would exit onto Bell Road, as well as the new driveway at 90th Street. So these access points are both in and out. It's just that the graphic was getting a little crowded to show every potential movement.
Okay.
Similarly, the driveways off of Pima Road and the frontage road connections are all both in and out, but those 2 locations are limited to right in and right out.
Okay, and tell me again, and I guess it's just a computer formula that you work to identify your 350 trucks per day?
Sure, and just to respond to some of the questions related to our projections, we took a look at all of the land uses within the entire limits of the project. So it wasn't just the northern portion. It did include everything down to Bell Road, all the way to the, the soccer fields and everything along Pima Road. So even though the site plan showed something as future, and we do identify those as adjacent project traffic, it's incorporated into the analysis that we do. So the traffic analysis is a look at everything within the purview of the project. Additionally, we do have adjustments to accommodate for those seasonal variations so that we don't use volumes from July to do our calculations. And we do anticipate future growth in traffic for other projects besides the ones that are being reviewed with this application. So a lot of the questions about are we using the right numbers, we believe we've taken the appropriate approach to it. Our projections are based upon national information, and they provide guidance for the percentage of trucks for warehouse uses. And so that's what we utilize. That 300 number is really a little bit misleading in that it's identified as 300 trips. And that would actually be, rounding off because it wasn't exactly 300, but it'd be 150 vehicles in and 150 vehicles out in a 24-hour period. So those numbers, when we say trips, it's not what's happening in 1 hour. The truck traffic in 1 hour is probably about 30 trucks in an hour distributed amongst all the potential routes in and out of the site. So any one particular location is, significantly less than that. And I think for some context, when we talk about how many cars in an hour, we added up the volumes that we counted at the northbound frontage road, Pima Road intersection. In 1 hour, that's over 4,000 vehicles. And the number of trips that we are adding as a percentage of that, especially in that northbound right turn, is very, very low. It's single-digit percentages. So when we talk about 30 truck trips in an intersection that currently is experiencing 4,000 cars per hour, that gives you a better feel for the potential change in the conditions that you would see with this. And I think the really significant part is on that northbound ramp coming off of the freeway approaching Pima Road, over half of the traffic that approaches that traffic signal is wanting to turn right. There's 4 lanes there today. All of it, that 50% is in a single lane. So we're going to be adding a second lane to be able to accommodate a very significant increase in the capacity for the busiest movement at that intersection. And the observations that people make that northbound right turn is sometimes not as efficient as it might be, is in some ways a component of the design because the drivers aren't certain that they're being added into a free flow lane. They look for traffic when they really don't have to. And the design that we've been looking at is going to try and incorporate 2 lanes and very clearly show that it is just slow down and turn without having to do any checks for opposing traffic because there won't be any.
Thank you. Again, from a site plan perspective, the bottom half of this project is a future phase where the 5 buildings are in the vacant lot. And for phase 1, and I guess for the record too, I had a call with Mr. Pascal and Mr. Morris the other day, and we talked a little bit about this, but I forgot to ask the question. And I know 91st Street's going to be built, and will the center access lane between the 2 buildings there on the easterly side of phase 1, will it be constructed all the way through to Bell Road, this first phase?
So the future phase incorporates the east-west connection, the frontage road, and the median modifications. The south leg across these future phases is built as part of that future phase.
This future phase, so the north-south access will not be built the first phase?
From the east-west Collector Street north, it will.
It will, right, but on the south
It will not. It'll be
Until the
incorporated
phase-
with the
second
future
phase.
phase.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's on my feet. That's,
Everything satisfactory to this point? Okay, very good. Oh, maybe I'll
I
go
was
to,
puzzled by that question. The 92nd Street corridor coming off of Bell, that is part of Phase 1, is that correct?
The extension north from the existing signal, yes.
Yes, okay, just to verify that, that was true. Okay.
Member Mason, is that,
Yes, that answers my question. I also had one other comment in terms of traffic. I just took a look at traffic, concerned about coming off and the merging. A lot of people come off at Frank Lloyd Wright, which means you just will take either a right turn onto Frank Lloyd Wright and then left into the center, or you'll be on the right-hand side of that exit, so you won't have to merge over. So trucks may be doing that.
There's certainly multiple routes that the trucks could take, coming in and out of the site using Bell Road as an alternative to the Pima interchange is one of those alternatives. The ADOT project that's going to add the additional lane on the 101 is going to also do some improvements down at the Frank Lloyd Wright interchange. And I'm sure they're anticipating that that will help in mitigating some of the delay that you see at that interchange today and make it more, advantageous for somebody to choose that route as opposed to some of the other options.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
I have questions, clarifications, and comments, so related to traffic. I wanted to just clarify, the ADOT 101 project, is that the one that's starting January of '24? And how long will that take?
Correct, Commissioner. It is anticipated to start early next year. I understand that the duration for that project, which includes the freeway widening plus the various improvements at Bell, or rather Pima and Frank Lloyd Wright, is approximately 700 days. So
A couple years.
yeah, that's, as they're doing those projects under traffic, they do take a little bit longer.
Right, okay.
700 days, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, let's say 2.5 years. We'll say. Okay, and then your phase 1 is inclusive of the street improvements around the perimeter of your whole development, is that right?
Correct. As part of our coordination with ADOT on the approvals, they stipulated the improvements that would be required as part of their review. And so they have suggested that all of the improvements around the perimeter, that from the frontage road, Pima Road, even the future access on Bell Road would be incorporated into the initial improvement.
And what is the timing of that? Roughly, I'm not going to. Well, I mean, you've got CDs to do and then groundbreaking, so are you planning on starting in 25, 24? What? 24? So 24 to 26 for first phase? Okay, for phase 1.
Should take a year to build a project, I'm hearing.
For phase 1, okay.
Councilmember Graham, if we could just have the speakers come up to the podium so we can get that on a record.
Yeah, we have to really minimize non-microphone speech for the public record and for those not here.
And in response to the question about the schedule, it is anticipated that those off-site improvements, roadway improvements, would happen in the first 12 months.
Okay, thank you. And then will you be doing a new traffic analysis after phase 1 completes and before initiation of phase 2?
So the traffic analysis that we've produced does cover all of the phases. So unless there was some change that required some additional analysis, the traffic study is complete with the full build-out condition.
But recognizing this is a spec project, you don't have specific tenants, and we don't know for sure what the market will bear in terms of how the site might be used. There could be changes in terms of the traffic, and this is getting to the question about if it becomes predominantly an office use as opposed to a warehouse use, that may change the dynamics of how the site is utilized. And I don't want to get off on the tangent of traffic. I know we're related to design, but a lot of sins can be solved through good design, and because we're doing this in phases, if we need to address something by design in the first phase to mitigate any changes that might occur in the market for phase 2, like a conversion plan for the buildings that might not need bays in the future, the market demand for the use might change in 2 years. So do we have that built into the model for traffic and the phasing of the project.
Commissioner, it's not uncommon if there are substantial changes from when the initial analysis was done that the city would ask for that to be updated. But right now, the expectation is that it would be developed according to the current plan. And if it did that, there wouldn't be additional analysis. But certainly, if there was some change, that would be something the city could.
So,
Councilmember Graham and Commissioner Kaminsky, my understanding would be that, as was stated, Phase 2 has not come in for DR approval yet, but once these are approved by DR, if there's a major change to the site plan that would require them to come back to DR, we would ask for an updated traffic impact analysis.
okay, okay. And so if the number of bay doors changed, would that be something that we would take into consideration for future phase?
So typically, the trip generation, which is the basis for our analysis, is based upon the building size and not directly related to the bay doors. So if the building size were to change, that would certainly be something that might be considered for updating.
Well, I'm sorry, with all due respect, if the size of the building is used for warehouse storage and distribution, and that changes to an office use, your occupancy would be greater, and that would affect traffic. So I guess that's where I was going with that question, and parking obviously would be part of that.
Commissioner, yes, you're correct, and that would be a land use change that would be different than what the assumptions in the current analysis have.
Okay.
But it's just that the bay doors is a little bit of a curious measure for these uses.
Sure.
If it went from warehouse to office, that certainly would change the results.
Character of the building, okay.
Ms. Kaminsky, would you mind if I added to what you're asking real quick? I mean,
Are
possibly.
Are you finished?
Well,
can she?
Okay, go ahead. I was just going to say, could we ask the applicant if they'd be willing to commit to a supplementary traffic study following the occupation of Phase 1, if that's something that they would be open to?
I'm not sure if that's in our purview, but if it's part of a design-triggered change, I think that's where we could do that.
Eric Anderson?
Thank you. Councilmember Graham, I do think that's outside your purview as far as that. As Mr. Kircher has stated, the Transportation Department does address that anytime there is a change. It's in their discretion. We do have a Transportation Commission as well that addresses transportation issues. So we're really focused on the design of the buildings today, not the traffic. So.
I appreciate your creativity, but you were blunted by the city attorney.
I had thought of that too. But,
Sorry.
I think, just to put this is my comment side of this, you know, if there's a demonstrated market demand for this use, that's why they're moving forward now. It's why it didn't move forward in the 1980s. And I think that the traffic issues and concerns will be largely mitigated by the ADOT improvements and the improvements that are coming in Phase 1 with the changes to the perimeter streetscape. And ultimately, I mean, this is where design can't solve operational challenges. But if I'm a market, and I'm not in the distribution business, but if I'm a truck driver and my schedule is I have to be point A to point B in a certain time frame, I'm going to avoid the times of day that are going to be really hard to get into the site. So I think that there's going to be an operational optimization of the site once you get tenants in and they understand the flow of traffic in the area. If they're coming from another region and they see how things work in our region, they'll make adjustments as long as we can meet the nuisance concerns of the neighbors in terms of lighting and noise and the other things that were mentioned in some of the writing that we had. So I'm comfortable with the direction it's going from a traffic standpoint.
Have we satisfied all of our questions on the topic of traffic? And then
Councilmember Graham, real quick, if I may interrupt, I just want to make sure you ask Mr. Fakih if he has any questions on that topic.
Brad, you're right. Mr. Fakih, it's, you know, out of sight, out of mind. I'm sorry. Well, you're not out of mind, but you're on all of our minds. If you're still there, I hope you haven't hung up on us because we're.
No, I'm here.
Okay, very good.
You know, I think, you know, like on the topic of traffic.
Can you speak just a little bit louder or closer to your microphone so we're able to hear you with clarity?
Sure. Do you want me to get rid of my accent too? So on the topic of traffic, you know, the biggest thing, as the board member mentioned, it's not something we are deciding on tonight, and I do see some of the concern, and I could see it. At the same time, we have to rely on the experts from both sides, from the city and the applicant side. And I think our transportation department been working with the applicant on this for a while. So I have to trust that they have a plan on how to mitigate any concern. And I will leave it there for the traffic. I do have some other question and comment, but as far as the traffic, I have to trust what our staff and the applicant engineer here presented to us today.
Very good. So you're satisfied with the traffic. Any other topics? Topic bingo. Which topic do my colleagues want to go to next? Design, appearance? The rest, the remainder? Yeah, landscape, buildings. So maybe just the rest.
I thought probably just since, sorry, I apologize for the dismay in the meeting. It's not normal. But I was just thinking, since it seemed like 90% of the comments that we got from the public were regarding that we could sort of nip it in the bud. And I know that it's out of our purview, and I don't think it's going to dictate. But I
also don't think the bud is nipped.
Right. Well, I'm not nip it in the bud. I just want to make sure that we're addressing it, and not just dismissing it, because clearly it's an issue.
Right.
But
well, very good. You want to go next, Vice Chair?
Sure. I can. My main concerns with this project are, I think it's unfortunate. Again, I would just start by saying I think the facades and the materials and the design of the building is great. I think that the landscape palette and the palette that's being proposed is, I've seen a lot of the work that's been done around the valley, and I think that this is an elevated project, and I think it does speak to the city of Scottsdale and how we do the development here. I will say that I'm concerned a little bit with the fact that we're exiting off of an exit ramp, so a lot of the views of this project are from an elevated, at least from a public right-of-way, are in an elevated scenario, because we're coming from the 101, which is 20 plus feet elevated above the site, and then you're on an exit ramp. So as you are waiting to exit out of this project, you are getting a lot of views into the site. So as I've had a meeting with both the attorney and the applicant, I do think that there is additional work that needs to happen with screening and shielding some of the dock views, and particularly between buildings C and D, I believe, or yes, between C and D, where there's a much longer building.
Could we bring up a rendering?
Or just a site plan is probably perfect. Do we have that? There we go. So I think if you look at the extension of the size of building C compared to building D, when you have buildings that are, all of the flow of traffic and visual corridor of this project is from northbound traffic on the 101 or from the frontage road, and so you do have what looks to be about 100 linear feet of dock space that is purging out past that view corridor. And you do have docks and trucks that go up all the way to the edge, the western edge of building C. And you have an acute turn radius that happens at that moment, which really mitigates the amount of screening that you can have from a landscape and from a screen wall standpoint. So I think specifically that portion of that building is something that needs to be looked at with regard to exposure of specifically a dock function and a shipping and receiving function from a primary public right-of-way corridor. So that's one aspect of the site. And again, I can just list these for the client or for the applicant to maybe look at and address. The other one, I think, as we've digested the character area plan, the airport character area plan, I thank you for the citizen who brought up some of the language in the general plan. It is awkward to see this size of building in Scottsdale, and I think that it's clearly something that the market is demanding right now, and so I respect the decision to move forward with something clearly we need here. But I do think that the adaptation of these building types to what we traditionally see in Scottsdale and our ethos of kind of a high design is something that we really need to pay attention to. The linear length of 770 linear feet of a building without more than a 4-foot interruption in the facade, I think generates a building massing that far exceeds what is acceptable within Scottsdale. So I think that there are ways to reduce the massing. I've spoken with the applicant about this previously, but I think that there are ways to reduce the massing and the ins and outs of the elevation of the large facades to address the massing concerns. I'll just add that primarily the view from the public right-of-way on 91st and from the freeway is going to be at the rooftop. And so the top, 10, 15 feet, 10, 12 feet of the building is what's most available to the eye. And so as you look at the alignment of parapets along the facade, I think there are options. The entirety of this building, the mechanical screening on the roof, it happens at the perimeter of the building. I think there's an opportunity on the edges of these buildings to possibly lower the parapet height down so that you are containing the roof structure, but you are recessing a mechanical screen wall. Those types of moves are fairly low cost from an impact, and they provide on the edges and the perimeter of this project a much better way for the eye to adapt to a nonstop parapet wall along the perimeter. So I think interrupting the parapet wall on the perimeter, as well as introducing intermittent recesses in the facade to give the look that the building is a compilation of multiple buildings instead of a singular building. And I think that, again, none of these things could be addressed prior to this hearing, but I think that looking at those two things will have some really good effects on again, the architecture, the material color, the palette, the gestures that mimic back to Taliesin, I think is fantastic. But I think that just that parapet screening and how this building meets the sky, and if it can have some variety and variation that is much more in line with the language of transitional, and without maybe increasing the height, but I do know that there's only, I think, 3 feet of height variation along the top of the parapet as it's currently proposed. And I know that that was in an effort to reduce the amount of height of this building. And I think that's something, as we digest community input, everyone's always looking to push down, push down, push down, push down. And I think that the adverse effect of that is that you end up with a really flat, uninteresting parapet around a building because you're looking to reduce the height as much as possible. So there could be areas that you may want to push up by 3 or 4 feet. I think from the view cast at 91st and some of the neighborhoods, a small portion of this building or highlighted an entry that's 3 to 4 feet taller than what's proposed may be another way of mitigating the massing in lieu of just pressing and lowering the height as absolutely as much as possible. That covers most of my comments, aside from asking the question, which hopefully someone can respond, if Ms. Irish's comment about the sawtooth docks was ever digested or looked at, and what was the reaction to that? Because I think that's an excellent point that was made, and I think it's something that, as the uglier sides of these buildings are obviously the receiving door areas, and that could just be a great way from as far as the public edge of this project, which is up against the freeway, to mitigate the straight-on look of the doors. So, thank you.
Applicants team want to respond to that?
Do you want me to respond to the staggered docks or kind of all the comments?
Well, you can respond to, I think you can respond to all of them if you can start with whichever one you want.
First of all, I have no doubt on your comments about screening, looking at the free off-ramp between C and D, that we can blow that up and look at mitigation for screening there with additional landscaping, and maybe the screen walls pop up a couple feet or something. We'll look at that line of sight getting off the freeway, blow it up, look at what we have today, enhance it if we need to. I have no doubt that we can buffer that better if we need to. So I noted that. Parapet relief, we'll definitely look at that as well. The view from 91st Street, same thing. We can look at that in 3 dimensions and see how we can soften that view potentially at the parapet line on 91st Street. And then the dock walls, I mean, we'd prefer to keep those straight for functionality, but we can look at the parapet relief on the back of the building as well. Stair stepping the docks that we saw I've only seen it once on a build-a-suit for a user. It's typically done when you're confined on space, and we have the space to get 190 to 200 feet for back-to-back shared truck courts. It's just only done if it's for a build-to-suit user that really has site constraints on their loading areas, because they're basically at, if you don't have the 130 feet to get trucks in and out, you would use less and confine, say on a 45 or a 60 degree or 30 degree angle, but you would, I can't think of a project that we've done it on a spec project basis where you have the room. It's just really preferred to line up the trucks in a row. On the inside of the building, it's also a safety issue. It's safety, it's racking, that when they're unloading, they want to see along the back wall and the inside, so to have that sawtooth, you lose the visibility along the inside of the building, which is another reason we wouldn't do it. So really, I mean, that's, yeah, I hope that answers that, but I mean, we would really, we would never prefer to do that. I can think of one building that we're doing right now with an angled dock, and it's a small building with a double berth, and it's, again, because the site is very restricted on the depth of the truck court in the back. I can't think of any others offhand that we've done it only for aesthetics or something. It's more the functionality of the building. So I think I've captured, Vice Chair Brand, I don't know if I missed any of your comments, questions.
No, that's satisfactory. I think what we've probably discussed is possibly looking at some of those, the elevation modifications following the meeting, so, or in a continued effort, a resubmittal and continued. So thank you for addressing those.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Joyner or Craig, anything further? I see nothing. Okay, Member Mason. Commissioner Kaminsky, you're fine. Commissioner Kaminsky.
Are you ready for 20 questions? They're not yes or no answers, sorry. But some of them are easy. I just want to clarify what the height, and I don't know if you know this or not, the height of the existing self-storage facility nearby, the height, the maximum height of what's allowed in the district, and there was mention of a significant topography change on this site. Building A, is it, or are any of the buildings recessed below the grade of the adjacent street frontage because of that topography change, or are they all being built up to be level?
The storage, I believe, is 44 or 46 feet. We plus or minus 2 feet. We're allowed 54 feet, but it's all the finished floors are based on the floodplain as far as when we set the finished floor, so it's 54 feet otherwise. The question on Building A with the sawtooth, I think is what you're asking, is?
Well, the height difference, just getting at, the height that you guys are proposing and that relationship to somebody walking on the sidewalk along the street front. Is it recessed at all on the site, or are the buildings being brought up because of the flood issues?
The fronts of each building are to be really at grade, at parking grades. You can walk into the entries at grade, so there's not going to be a major step in ramps and steps at the front.
Okay.
All the offset is done in the truck courts with dock high loading and truck wells and things like that. So as you've gone from building A to D, that transition is really in the truck court. And then also between the fronts of B and C, there's a landscape strip that's going to drop grade in there as well. So as you're stepping down in grade, I think Steve had a section earlier about the finished floors dropping from north to south.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, so I think the perception of the height of these, there will be some variation. The site's not perfectly flat.
Correct. I mean, from building A to D, Steve, I think we have 17 feet of fall on finished floors. And then the second phase, there's 13 feet of fall.
Okay.
Between finished floors. So it's substantial, and we're used to doing projects like this that are relatively flat.
And I appreciate that, because I think that will help add variation to the site. And I appreciate the comments that were made earlier regarding maybe adding height where it's appropriate for the parapet. Looking at it as five-sided architecture because of the views from airplanes, from freeway, right, from different angles. And so really looking at that whole polygon in all forms, I think, will be helpful, and you've got a little bit of play in terms of the height that's allowed by the standards, so thank you.
Okay.
The space between the buildings where the docks are, and I don't have the drawings in front of me, 130 feet from face of building to face of building with the bay doors, is that right?
Well, A and B, I think, are 190 feet where you have shared truck courts back to back. If you had single loaded a single-loaded building, it would be 130 feet would be the standard. Where you have back-to-back, building A and B, I think are 190, and building C and D, C is a little bit bigger, that's 200 feet in between those buildings.
So I've never driven a semi, and I would never want to have to maneuver those around each other, but if there was anything you could do, like using the sawtooth design on those bay doors, even in maybe not every single bay door, but offsetting the building in clusters, that would enable you to reduce the amount of paving between those buildings. Not only does it reduce paving, it would potentially offer more open space up at the street front. So if there is any room to play in the building architecture that would enable accommodation of the request that was made by DC, maybe not every single bay door, but in clusters of them that would have an angled approach and reduce that width between the buildings to give more front landscape, that would be something to consider.
Speaking for my client, I'm sure that angling the truck docks would not be desired. We would prefer to have the 190 and 200 feet. It's just not functional. You can't do it in part of the building and pull the buildings in and not affect the rest of truck courts. I think it just, that starts to domino on the functionality of these buildings function and work because of that lighter gray area, which is all concrete and it's functional truck loading. And the minute we, alter that and make it not ideal, it's going to create leasing issues. There's buildings around town that they're not our projects, other people's projects, but if you break any rules with industrial, they're sitting out there empty, West Valley, Southeast Valley, because the tenants have options and they want everything to be ideal for truck loading and parking and convenience. And if we started to do that, it would affect the leasability of the building.
So can anything be done using cool paving that would withstand the weight of semis to reduce the amount of heat gain from those large black courts?
Well, right now, we've already done that. The truck courts are solid concrete. They're not asphalt.
Okay.
So the light gray and all the truck courts are concrete.
Okay. Thank you. You had mentioned earlier native stone on the building. Is it real stone, and what's considered native? Where is it from?
I don't recall the quarry, but it's on the color material palette.
It is Arizona stone?
I believe it's a local.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to know what native was, yeah.
Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, I just want to make some...
But it actually has the name Telluride on there, so don't hold that against me.
I would just like to make some clarification statements just on the heights. The I-1 zoning district only allows 52 feet in height total, and the existing storage building was approved at 36 feet in height.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. How many truck bays are there? Somebody had brought that up, and I did not count them, so.
No.
I don't have the number in front of me, the truck bays per building.
Or the total?
Scott, do you have the number?
Okay.
So there's about 150, a member of the audience said.
150 to 170. The reason I ask, and this is one of the questions I had asked earlier, is if the bay doors could be painted a neutral color to match the adjacent wall rather than white. I know that there are paint color options available with manufacturers that you can get a different choice of color, or you can do customized. My concern is that we're really drawing attention to something that's kind of a sore subject. So if they were able to blend those in with the building elevations, that would be helpful.
No, it's not in there. I don't know if we have inside. To respond to that, I would say that hopefully we do a good enough job screening the truck courts. I think in 2D elevations, when you look at the package, the doors, there's quite a bit of contrast on the doors on the inside, but hopefully with the screening that we do, there's walls on each end, the building, they're between the buildings. Hopefully the public will not see the doors hardly at all. Now, we always prefer to do a factory finish because of the wear and tear in the doors. There's only 4 or 5 colors that we can pick from, and none of the colors work with our palette at all. So we just went back to one of the local, one of the manufacturers recently, and we've looked at this. another city here in the valley asked us to try and find a color that was blending, and we've typically determined this, and in this, it's like an off-white that's in the color range, right? And none of the other three or four colors were really working with our color palette. And then the other thing is the users and truck drivers, for safety, and they prefer to have the contrast. So instead of them blending in with the wall, they would prefer to have contrast just for getting in and out. And a tenant may have 10 doors and they want to identify, and they'll generally number or letter them. So when they have a truck driver coming, it's going to be A through D or something like that. But we looked, and out of the other factory finished colors, there were no colors that worked with the palette that we have, or we might have done that.
Like, I guess I've looked online, and it depends on the manufacturers, but I guess I would be concerned that the white is a very glaring color, and I think it's going to stand out. So that is a concern that I have. And then I had brought up the possibility of using integral colored concrete, and I love the design and I love the colors. But paint is something that's not really sustainable long term. And if you're doing tilt slab construction, you're adding pigment to the raw concrete. It becomes a much more honest and natural material, and having the pigment built into the concrete. I know there's tons of colors out there, so I wanted to find out if that's something that could be considered rather than paint. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's something to consider.
The problem with integral colors, we've done it on some smaller buildings, but the consistency is just not all that great. And, you know, if you do precast, you can get very good consistency with a colored concrete, but these panels are actually cast and poured on the floor and lifted. And to try and get consistency in a color is just very difficult. Plus, these panels have 3 to 4 colors on them. So you can't, once you pour a panel, it's got to be, if you do integral color, it's got to be one color. So then you've got a kind of an inconsistent color of concrete, and then you're painting the other 2 colors over that kind of mottled. It's just, we don't think, in this case, it's going to be a solution that would look all that well.
Okay. Thank you. I had asked about the sidewalks and the location of trees. On one of the, I think it was on Pima Road, it looked like the majority of the trees were on the east side of the sidewalk, and I'm concerned about providing shade along these new sidewalks that we're putting in. And then there was a condition number 25 that referred to the property owner shall update the landscape plans to show all utility lines and ensure that no trees are within at least 8 feet of any utility lines. And I added any trees shown in conflict or on the plans that are in conflict with utilities shall be relocated on the site to maintain tree canopy coverage. So one of my concerns is if we haven't nailed down all the utilities yet, and we're coming in and we're putting in sidewalks, and now we discover that there's a conflict with trees, what typically happens is the trees get removed to accommodate the utilities. And I'd like to have enough wiggle room within the street frontages that if that sidewalk needs to move, we move the sidewalk on the plans so that we can accommodate trees on the correct side of the sidewalks. On the, you know, if it's on the south side of the site, the trees are on the south side of the sidewalk. If it's on the west side of the site, the trees are on the west side of the sidewalk. And to have enough wiggle room within the landscape design, knowing you've got a huge culvert that you're conveying water through this area, that we can accommodate the trees and not remove them by discovery of utility needs later.
Yeah, I'm not, would there be a stipulation there? I mean, we're conforming to city code and ordinance as far as tree location and things like that, and then with easements, I'm not sure if there's a stipulation that we could agree to or something that we're looking at all those things for sure. I don't know if we need.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, we were just talking about this. I think we're on the same page, which is, if I understand what you're saying, where there may be a conflict during construction, where we find things or when all of the utilities are located and redone, to the extent that there's the option of either losing the tree because of a conflict or relocating a tree to make sure that there's shade canopy. It's the latter. You want to make sure we're not losing trees as a result of that and that they're relocated, creating shade canopy over the sidewalks.
Yes, if there's a total number of trees counted on this landscape plan, at the end of the day, we could count and there'd be those number of trees. But the other part of it is my concern about the sidewalks and the proximity of where the trees are planted. On the Pima Road side, most of the trees shown are on the east side of the sidewalk. And that's the wrong side to provide shade to the public along the sidewalk. So it's two separate issues, but related to shade, yes.
It sounds like we'll have an opportunity to look at some other aspects, so we can look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I think that's it from my spreadsheet. I didn't count if it was 20 questions, but thank you.
Very good. Member Faki, have your questions been answered to your satisfaction?
Councilmember Graham, I believe that Board Member Faki had to drop off the call. I was informed of that. So unless
We didn't scare him off, right?
I think it
didn't have-
might have been a connection issue. I'm not sure. I know he is.
When I call people, I get that all the time.
I think it was the length of the meeting. I
Yeah.
think that killed it. But if staff can confirm that, I think over there at the table.
I hope we don't. Hope this commission doesn't have that effect on people more often. So with these new members, I will invite.
Yes, I have confirmed we did lose Board Member Faki.
Okay. Hopefully we lost him. Hopefully we find him one day.
We lost Brad too, so hurry up so we don't.
We're actually gonna lose more people here pretty soon. Any other comments, questions from the members of the board? I see heads shaking. Well, we had a presentation. We had staff presentation. We had members of the public share their comments. We had the applicant respond to those comments, and then we had members of the board ask their questions and share their concerns. So I think that kind of, and we even went to the edge of some of these topics as far as Phil talking to us about traffic and his thoughts about some of the concerns we've been hearing. So with all that summed up, I will invite one of my colleagues to make a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. Hopefully, if I miss anything, Commissioner Kaminsky can assist me. I'm going to make a motion to continue case 49-DR-2022, number 2, to give the applicant time to work with staff on the board-directed comments regarding shipping bay screening from view corridors, attempts to break up the massing from an elevation standpoint, and variation in parapet height, as well as some of the sidewalk and tree placement issues. And anything else? I think that covers it. To a date to be determined by staff.
I'll second it.
What, the bay color?
Bay door color, too?
And the bay door color, manufacturer's bay door color.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Brand. We were just discussing with staff. It would be easier for notice and posting to continue this to a date certain. That would give us the ability to spend our entire holiday working on this and leave
You're
our
welcome.
families.
Do you have a suggested date?
Actually, a January date will give us sufficient time.
January 18th, February 1st. February 15th. These days are starting to fill up. You better hurry. You better pounce.
I feel like I'm at an auction. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious if there was still the December 21st date. Are you maintaining that hearing?
This, I understand, is our final meeting of this calendar year.
That's
before we begin enjoying our holidays.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, the 18th.
Councilmember Graham, I think is there a January 4th date? Yeah, there is a January 4th date on the calendar that you just approved.
Is there that much pressure to specify a date? Eric?
It is helpful for staff because if you set it for a date certain, that affects some of the publication requirements and stuff.
Very good. January 4th, would that be satisfactory, Jason?
Thank you. And we'll be ready.
I will amend my motion to continue to include a continued date of January 4th.
Thank you very much. We
And
look
I'll
forward to
second
coming.
that.
All right, motion has been made, and it was seconded by Member Joyner. Caitlin is our scribe. Caitlin, are you getting all this in these meeting minutes? Okay. She's not used to being called on very often. Carissa, please call roll. Thank you.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Mason,
Yes.
Next to last.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Jason, for your time and for your team. Steve, Rick, Chuck, and the additionals that didn't speak, and those additional, and the investors with the capital behind the project. Do you guys want to adjourn and push the next,
Yes.
next one? Do you want to push that to the next meeting?
When do you have
Your flight's at 6:50.
Well, he's going to leave at 5:15. I got to leave at 5:30.
Even if you had to leave. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Councilmember Graham, are we going to proceed with the next item, or?
Can we have a moment to confer up here?
You
Thank
can
you.
certainly confer, and if it's your discretion, if you want to take a
Okay.
recess for a brief amount of time.
Let's recess let's recess for 3 minutes.
Okay.
Set the clock for 3 minutes. Yeah, Mr. Pedgman. Okay. I'm sorry, Caitlin, for putting you on the spot. I hope you forgive me. You don't deserve that. You deserve better. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed your commercial break. Can somebody from the city let me know that my mug is on the TV, that we're live? Are we live? Because I'll do it live. I'll do it live. Okay, very good. Welcome back to this DRB meeting, and this is, we just concluded item number 9. We're moving on to item number 10, 11DR 2023, The Artisan. Waylon Barton. Waylon, we are going to ask you not to, the last item was extremely protracted, and so we want to maybe emphasize a little more concision here. Can you go to the series of slides that focus on the plastic landscaping? Sure. And we'll probably keep our commentary brief, because I know we have one request for public comment.
Okay. So I think we have the slide up right now there of the south building with that west elevation facade on the top left there. You can see kind of that green wall rendering. So that would be one of the key issues that were identified in the staff report. So for just some background here, during staff review and coordination with the applicant who's here today, we identified this possible inconsistency with design guidelines, which primarily promote snow and desert landscaping. So we did discuss this at length, but we understand that there are some other landscaping elements on this site more consistent with the design guidelines. This particular feature, we understand, is in response to some of the neighbor feedback, some of the design elements from SWABAC. So that's where we left it in the DRB analysis there for the staff report. There was another highlighted issue in the staff report, but I believe, Councilman Graham, this is the one that we're going to be discussing this afternoon here for this artisan project. So with that, if there's no questions directly for city staff, SWABAC Mike is here to present their side of the case. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Graham.
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky and the other board members. I'm Mike Wetzel, partner, SWABAC, located at 7550 East McDonald here in Scottsdale.
Mike, thank you for being here. Is 5 minutes sufficient for your presentation?
I'll fly through the
very good.
slides as quickly as possible.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Sure. So thank you, Waylon, for a brief presentation, and thank you, other staff members, for those involved to get us where we are today. I appreciate the efforts. I'd also like to thank Josh Stroot with Sub4, general contractor, who's also representing ownership today. So anytime we get into a project, we're always looking for right sizing of spaces, and that translates to massing, as well as creating some visual interest in elevations to create shade and shadow. This is one of our key intersections at Marshall and Indian School. If you could go back to that first slide, I can't talk that fast. Thank you. So this is a key intersection. The primary element to consider here is the public art. This is one of our first pieces of the public art. We've been coordinating with the artists, the Public Art Commission, as well as ownership. You can see the piece of art there in the lower middle section with its geometric form. This is also a key intersection for the entrance to the gallery lobby, and I'll speak to that momentarily. Here is another view looking along Indian School. This is a good perspective to represent all of our materials. We have a Jerusalem gold material that has a split face texture to create some interest in the overall architecture. We have a blend of 3 colors of blue metal siding to create some interest that anchors the right side of this image and up to the 4th level. We also have a dark anodized bronze material that accentuate the private terraces for each of the units. We also have a Cherokee red for the fascia, which is a nod to Frank Lloyd Wright. and his influence here in the Valley, as well as with his influence to our firm and the history of our firm with Frank Lloyd Wright. We also have a vertical grain wood siding that's a longboard. That's a metal siding for durability and longevity. It's not an actual wood, and we took that into consideration in the design and selection of materials. Here we're back at the critical intersection. This shows our entrance lobby. The city, during a lot of our DRB meetings, talked about connectivity from the north to the south down to Main Street, and this is a key element because we have our entrance lobby, and that was designed with this in mind, thinking that we could have exhibitions, workshops, and get the residents and the general public involved as well. Also to note that although this project is separated by an alley, we have two buildings, the south building and the north to the right, that they are visually connected not only in terms of its architectural treatments, but as materials as well. Here is a view looking northwest in the South Art Plaza. We will have our second installation that's just below the perspective here for the public art. We're excited to see those go through the next stage with the Public Arts Commission, and looking forward to the integration of those into our project. Something that's key to note here, we do have a separate public access stairway from the first tray of below-grade parking. We do have a total of 3 below-grade parking trays. The bottom 2 are for residents, and that first one is for public. And so we were very thoughtful to create a separate public access way that gets you up to grade from that level. Here is the one perspective that was mentioned relative to the, it hurts to say, plastic landscaping. This was a very thoughtful selection. We met with the manufacturer's representative on several occasions. This is a Vista Folia product. It was key in the selection process because it's the technology has improved for durability, its realism, its color. It also carries a 5-year warranty. Something also important to note here, this is our primary entrance, and working with Phil and staff, we have a modified CL2 entrance that takes you into the south building to surface parking. We also have approximately 5,000 square feet of commercial space located on the ground level of this south building. That covers the perspectives, and did it with 15 seconds to spare.
What would you like to do with the rest of your time?
Happy holidays.
I've got a public comment request. Is there anything from staff they want to add, Wayland? Any fact-checking or anything? Everything you said was vetted.
Councilmember Graham, that's correct. No further comment from staff. Thank you.
Mr. Pedgman, if you could please state your name and address and share your thoughts with us in 3 minutes or less.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, and the rest of the commissioners. Bob Pedgman addresses on the record, and Mike addressed some of the concern that I had. So this project has three parking levels, P1, P2, P3, P1 being the highest level, and P1 is the public parking level. And we worked with the architect previously to make sure that that public level doesn't have any elevators or stairs, direct access to the units, because the first level is the most convenient. And to avoid cannibalization, so that it's not really the apartments taking up the public, you know, I think that's addressed now. But also one other concern, and I don't know if this is within the purview of this board, is that how does this development avoid the guest from parking in the public, because this development does conform to the requirement of 1 guest space per 6 units, so it does. And those guest spaces are on P2 and P3. But if those guests don't have access, they can, I'm just trying to figure out if something can be figured out to avoid that. So anything to avoid cannibalization of the public spaces, you know, when there is space in the bottom two. And finally, I know that there maybe there are a dozen tandem spaces included in here, right, in the design. And tandem spaces, as you know, are not easy to deal with. So I asked the attorney back when this was going to the Planning Commission to stipulate that those tandem spaces should belong, each of those tandem spaces should belong to the same unit, because otherwise it'd be a disaster, right? Somebody trying to get out of somebody's way. And I'm trying to figure out how that can be stipulated, if it's within your purview or whatever. I'm just bringing these issues on parking, otherwise everything else has been decided on. And I think the design looks pretty nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pejman.
Councilmember Graham, if I might for just a second, I did have the pleasure of working on an extensive development agreement with the developer on this project.
Oh, very good.
Including the public parking spaces. There are provisions in that agreement that allow the city to have some tools to work on to make sure that that is ensured as public parking. So I'll just point that out for the board's benefit.
I'm concerned because the guest park, so the public parking, there's going to be a 3-hour limit or something like that, right?
That's one of the tools. I tell you, I can't recite it from memory. I know that one specifically, the city does have the right to restrict by hour the parking. So we could put a restriction in there to 3-hour parking to avoid overnight guest parking, things like that. So,
will the guest parking for the units be in a separate location than the public parking?
That's correct. There is also a stipulation, as I think was mentioned, that the access to the resident parking has to be through separate access and can't be direct access from the public levels.
Okay, so the public parking access point is different than the residents and their guests.
The ability to park the car, I don't, is different, and I'm not positive on that. As far as the ability to park the car on the first level, you can't direct access to the resident
Okay, so
space.
if I'm a resident and I live there and I park in the public parking, I have to come out of the building and go into a different entrance to get in.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's the city has the right to regulate.
What about that tandem comment that Mr.
I think that's in there, but I don't want to swear to it because it's
like you
been
to-
a while.
I'd like you to
believe
swear-
there
I'd
is
like
a
you to swear to it.
I believe that, and the developer is confirming. We did discuss that, and I believe there's a provision in the agreement also that requires that the tandem parking be assigned per space, so that to avoid that.
Per unit.
The same unit is assigned to the tandem parking, so that you don't have a.
There's not a
scenario.
single tandem space, meaning 2 spots tandem, that belong to more than one unit.
I believe that's in the agreement.
Okay. I think we're gonna minimize our questions. I've probably pushed the limit on what I promised I would be asking about, but Mr. Pejman brought up some decent points, some good points, I think. Commissioner Kaminsky.
Thank you. My concern is predominantly with this south wall. I love the design other than that. And when I look at architecture, if this were real living plants, there would be a wall behind it. There would be some material that was the wall of the building. And I would hope that wall had a material on it that had a warranty of more than 5 years. So I don't consider living plant or artificial plant as an architectural building material. It's something that's applied to the wall. And in particular case, I've noticed that with living plants, that's a maintenance issue. If you don't water it, if it dies, you have to replace it. But with the artificial plants, even with all the new technologies and the beautiful, amazing things they have, especially on a ground level in a pedestrian area that's highly visible and accessible to the public, it would take one weekend of somebody walking by and tearing out all the plant material, or a storm in the summer, to have it really look bad. And yes, that is a maintenance issue, but it becomes a code enforcement issue if the owner of the property doesn't keep it up. And I just don't feel that it's appropriate to have a non-building material as an architectural solution to a permanent structure. So I have no issue with the upper floor in the courtyard area, because that's for your residents and that's up to them to maintain and keep looking nice for their use. But this is the public realm. And so I had made a suggestion to utilize the colors that were above, the colors and materials above, the blue and the kind of gold color, and just bring those down on the elevation and really utilize the beautiful building materials that you have on the ground floor pedestrian area that's accessible to the public. You did reply that if you were to do that, it would be the blue material only, and I'm totally fine with that. I certainly don't want to get into the nuances of your selection of colors and materials, but I do not consider plant material, particularly artificial plant material with a 5-year warranty, as an architectural solution. So,
Councilman Graham, Commissioner Kaminsky, thank you. So as Wayland had mentioned, there were a variety of meetings with the neighbors that resulted in this. There is a structural wall behind that treatment, and it would be as such if we were to go to the blue metal siding.
so if you were to remove the plastic wall, we have blue metal siding beneath it?
As a replacement for that treatment, yes.
Okay, so we would not have the plastic plants, we would just have the blue wall?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be really fast. And
Yeah, Member Craig.
Good point, Commissioner Kaminsky. Can you, if we decide to stipulate that we eliminate the plastic wall, can we minimize or skinny up that sidewalk and add some plant material between the wall and the sidewalk, or is there room there to do that, or is there a minimum walk width so that we can somehow, just something?
Match the front.
Councilmember Graham and Board Member Craig, thank you for that question. We are right on the property line, and given our ramp location and the need for a curb and then a 24-foot wide ramp for ingress egress, it would be very difficult to provide any additional space there.
Sorry, Member Gregg. That might have been your final question on this commission.
Dang it, I'm going out with a thud, aren't I?
Mike, he's been here 6 years. This is his final meeting. I don't know if you heard that. So, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just want to share that I've actually personally worked on this property for a number of different developers in the earlier years, and I just want to extend kudos to the development team. This is an incredibly difficult site to make this happen on, and essentially worked with two people that threw their hands up in the air and said there's no way this can get done. So very happy to see that a corner that's a very difficult piece of property, something that's beautifully designed, get done, and thank you for listening to the comments. I do have one nitpicky thing to ask, and you can completely ignore it or not. I think that the red accents are beautiful on the building. One thing I looked at, I was hoping that the red or some other dark tone would be continued on the underside so it felt a little bit more planar in nature instead of kind of linear around the perimeter. But I'm assuming that you guys had considered that, or you would prefer to see something in high contrast on the soffit. But that was just my immediate thoughts. I was like, oh, that'd be great. But other than that, I'm in full support of the project. I won't be making any stipulations to that matter, but I appreciate the project being put forward.
Mike, thank you for your presentation. Not seeing any further questions from my colleagues at this time. So with that, I will invite one of my colleagues to make a motion. Maybe perhaps Member Craig, since it's his final.
I did so bad at the beginning. I'm going to let Commissioner Kaminsky do that.
It's your final opportunity to make a motion on something.
Please.
I'd like to move approval of item number 10, 11DR 2023, the Artisan, with a stipulation that the plant material on the south elevation, number 411, be replaced with any combination of materials that are part of the architectural palette for the project.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Member Craig.
Thank you.
Carissa, please call roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Brand?
Yes.
Board Member Joyner?
Yes.
Board Member Craig?
Yes.
Board Member Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for your flexibility and the truncation of time there. And Josh, good luck with your project. The rest of your team. Yeah, you guys stuck it out. So I think that's the end of the meeting. I want to thank Brad Carr, Eric Anderson, Waylon. We got Brian Clough in the house, and we got some local icons in the audience. We want to thank you, and we want to thank everyone who's still streaming at this point online. So Best of wishes, and thank you for your volunteerism over the years, Member Craig. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yo.
Okay. We're adjourned. Is that satisfactory? Thank you, Carissa and Caitlin.